Well, hello everyone, and welcome back to Uncivil Law, where as always we learn through the misfortunes of others. I am your host, Uncivil Law, a licensed attorney in both Texas and Virginia. We are here in Florida with the case of School Resource Officer Scot Peterson. Scot Peterson was tasked with his duty station as the school, a fully licensed police officer. His duty station was the school. It was the school for 9 years leading up to the school shooting that occurred February 14th, 2018, in which 17 students, or which 14 students and 3 adults died, and 17 others were injured. The school shooter himself, of course, has already been tried, convicted, and sentenced to life in prison. The school resource officer is being charged essentially with cowardice, technically negligence that led to the death of children and adults, and also one count of perjury relating to alleged lies he told during some sort of official investigation that was subject to the penalties of perjury. The possible penalties include up to 95 years in prison, plus loss of his pension, which I believe is something like $104,000, but I'd have to check. That's every year, by the way. And so that's what's going on. So far in the state's case, we've heard some ancillary testimony relating to some activities of the defendant, but we don't have anything approaching a complete picture. Also, to the extent we have information regarding the defendant, his actions seem to be consistent with other officers on the scene. For example, we've heard from a few other officers who saw the defendant do things, but those things were similar to what those officers themselves were doing at their respective times. So what we don't really have, and we don't really have good information from when the shooting itself was actually occurring in sort of that frame. So that is a little unclear. Right now, we are hearing from a former English teacher on the stand, I believe is still on the stand, who, like many teachers before her and students who have testified, is essentially there to bring emotion into the case as best she can. But it doesn't appear that she's offering anything fundamentally new versus other teachers or other students. There was a gunman. He hurt people. He hurt my students, as in this case, killed my students. There was terror. We were there for a long time waiting for the police to come. And we didn't really see the defendant himself do anything, which isn't to say that he wasn't doing anything, just that they didn't see him doing anything. Of course, it's worth mentioning again, this is a very large school, 45-acre campus, 3,000 students, multiple buildings. It's very, very large, a bit of area. So very difficult for one officer, of course, to secure the entire scene by himself. The testimony we've also heard has been somewhat favorable to the defense in a lot of different domains. We've talked a lot about how there was a lot of confusion, as you might expect. In a fog of war, the officer was getting a lot of conflicting information, potentially from both school radios and police radios and other traffic, getting conflicting information about what the shooters were or what they were doing, and so forth and so on. So what we don't have right now is a really good picture of what the officer was doing. My understanding is there is some sort of tape that might show his actions, but that tape has not yet been offered into evidence. So for the purposes of our exercise, the tape doesn't exist because, well, it's not presented to the jury, so it's not available to us. So we will see how it progresses. So far, the state has not made its prima facie case, in my humble opinion. If they are able to make their prima facie case, the defense has created multiple avenues that might be helpful to them when it comes to defense and closing. So even if they're able to make their prima facie case, the defense has at least left them open some doors that look like they might be promising. So if we had to cast the vote right now, the vote is not guilty, but we do not have sufficient information to really adjudicate this one way or another right now. That is where we're sitting at the moment. For all the people who are here from Recovery Addict, we appreciate all the people joining us. Recovery Addict, a friend of the channel, does good work, and we appreciate you joining us. We'll try to give you some insights and things as it progresses. Castle Rock versus Gonzalez appears to have no particular relevance, Adam. Castle Rock versus Gonzalez is a case dealing with civil liability. This is a criminal case. So I don't think Castle Rock versus Gonzalez is relevant to this particular case. So I don't expect it to come up. The nature of his duty and where exactly it's coming from has not particularly been devised as a result of statute yet. So I don't know if we're just using a generalized duty that exists to all officers to try to get to the specific, or there was, at least in the opening, some idea that this might be a matter of contract because he is assigned to the school, that the school had a contract with the police office, and because he's filling that role, he has contractual obligations, so duty from contract. But we haven't heard any specifics about a contract yet either. So not 100% sure what the theory on the duty to act is coming from, but that might very well be developed. We will see. You had to get a triple baconator last night after looking at that steak. Triple baconator is a solid choice. Respect. My steak turned out well. I just had another one for lunch. Fantastic. I appreciate everyone who tries to bring attention to the channel and helps to bring people here. All of you who have Twitter, you can please retweet the pinned comment. It helps a lot with gaining traffic. So if you can retweet it, and if you don't have the Twitters, then sharing this on your social media of choice will also be fine. We do like to get everyone involved. I think this is a case both interesting legally and factually. So I don't feel like I have enough information to adjudicate this either on the law or the facts, which makes it exciting for me. So we'll see how it all progresses as we go on.
I'm going to go back on the record. This is State versus Scot Peterson, 197166 CF10A. I have Ms. Gomes, Mr. Killer, and Mr. Klinger present for the state. I have Mr. Igosh present with Mr. Peterson. Mr. Peterson likewise is present. We are outside the presence of the jury. State, anything you need me to do before we get the witness back on the witness stand and resume with your direct examination?
No, sir, I just wanted to alert you and the defense, when we put the witness back on the stand, there's going to be a video shown, so already knows. Then I'm going to introduce a composite of photographs. That would be next. And then after that, there's another video which is already in evidence from another witness. I'm going to play all but the last 11 seconds of that video. And then I'm going to ask when the witnesses left the courtroom to play or to show that last 11 seconds.
Yeah, if he's being charged as a caregiver, I'm not sure how that applies legally. Perhaps we'll hear more about that. I'm not quite sure what the theory of him being a caregiver is under the relevant statutes. We'll see.
The defense had no objection, but I don't think it actually was moved into evidence in front of the jury. 21? It is Exhibit 21?
Yes.
Okay, very good. Okay, State, I appreciate you giving me the heads up. Anything else before we get going?
No.
Can I get the witness back on the witness stand, please? Defense, anything else you need me to address before we get going?
No, thank you.
Okay.
What was 21?
You, for identification, became State's 21.
And what was it?
It's a video that has
Oh,
not
okay.
been published yet.
I'd like to think that I'm as good as a Steve Gosney, but your mileage may vary. Where Steve Gosney is a defense lawyer in Florida, so I suppose he does have that going for him. Sound is very, very low. It's just background audio right now. Now it's turned off.
Back to the witness stand, right where you were before the lunch break, please. And once you're seated, if I can get you to scoot that chair all the way up. You're still under oath from this morning.
Okay.
Please bring the jury back in.
Oh, that's the wrong banner. There we go. Nurses and healthcare providers can be charged under these kinds of statutes. It does occasionally happen. It's pretty rare. But because, you know, doctors do have a duty that arises, you know, from their hospital contracts. So, you know, very rarely you do see a doctor or nurse charged criminally. It does happen. Pretty rare. I'm not sure about the police officer and that applicability here, but we're going to find out on the law as we progress. If like a surgeon were drunk out of their mind or something while they were trying to do a surgery and someone died, you might see a criminally negligent homicide charge come out of that. That'd be the kind of thing that you would potentially see happen. Doctor not stopping at a car accident would do it. He's not on duty at that particular moment. So it wouldn't apply for a doctor failing to stop at an accident because he's not on duty. It would have to be a doctor who is working at a hospital in which he's on the clock and a patient who is duly admitted. And it would have to be someone, it would have to be something like the doctor being intoxicated, like before you would even contemplate criminal liability.
What's now in evidence as States 21. So, Mr. Civic, if you could please play that for us. And this would, this would not be.
Yeah, court deputy, none of the telephone.
Right, that's right, Starlight. Not sure if all states, but in South Carolina, we don't have a duty stop. But once we do start care, we can't abandon. That's correct. That's true for civilians as well.
I know you. I know you guys hear me.
Now I'm going behind the cover. Bye, guys.
It sounds like somebody in the bathroom.
If you start to undertake the rescue, you have a duty to see it through. So that's true for civilians as well.
Ms. Lippel, can you give me the time frame of, we've already discussed the afternoon when that was, that's indicative of what time in the afternoon that was?
That was probably around like a little after 2:20. So that was after we heard the first set of like popping sounds. So we heard them, we sort of stopped for a second trying to figure out what it was. And then I think it was like right before, I think during that video, the second set of popping sounds were happening.
Although it's not what we're discussing about, I'm not sure what the liability would be, for example, for an EMS person just not responding to a scene.
We heard.
Like even if they were dispatched, if they never go to the scene just because they don't feel like it, I'm not sure what liability there would be.
Well,
I wouldn't think there'd be liability, but I'm not expert on every jurisdiction.
The alert that went off, and I think everybody was.
But if you actually start to undertake the rescue, you have a duty to kind of see it through.
The fire alarm went off because we were trying to figure out what the noise was. So the fact that the fire alarm went off, and it's so loud, it's so piercing that it just sort of jolts you every time it goes off. You know, I just remember being in that building. Anytime the fire alarm would go off, it just sort of startles you. You know, so I think everyone was sort of on edge. And then I think that's why everybody was
Can I pause if I need to talk the video? No, I'm going to talk over it. This is a commentary channel. If you don't want to have commentary, you're more than welcome to go somewhere else.
After coming on.
Subtitles are on screen, so you won't miss anything.
It stayed on for, I don't know how long, maybe a minute, 45 seconds a minute, which is also unusual because normally it would go on for a while. But the alarm was going off as we were evacuating the classroom. And I don't remember when it went off. I don't remember if I heard gunshots and the alarm at the same time.
Well, let me ask you that, just a quick question about normal procedure. If that alarm goes off, is it normal procedure to immediately start evacuating, or do you wait for anything to come over? Do you have a PA system?
I don't think this
We do have a
testimony is
PA system, but
particularly
the
compelling.
protocol then was exit
Testimony is
immediately.
fundamentally the same as from the
There was
other
never an announcement,
teachers and
ever.
children.
Yeah.
I haven't really heard any substantive difference from this witness.
Oh, let me ask you further. Did you ever hear an announcement come over the speaker of a code red that day?
No.
Yeah, approach the witness.
You may.
Could you please take a look at what's in Marjory States V and tell me if you recognize that diagram?
Yeah, that's the diagram of the third floor of the 1200 building,
Okay. And your classroom number again was?
1255.
All right. And does that accurately and fairly depict the diagram accurately and fairly depict the layout of the third floor of the 1200 building?
Yes.
Judge, at this time, the state would ask to move State V into evidence.
Any objection?
No objection.
Without objection, states V for identification will now be in evidence that is State's Exhibit 22.
And if the court, if I could use the Elmo to publish, there's nothing sensitive.
The TVs can be on for this.
Yes. Okay.
Fair enough, SD Trekkie girl. Perhaps I was too harsh in my response.
The pencil and the marker, please.
I was trying to be direct, and maybe it was overly harsh. I appreciate the feedback.
Give me 1 second.
I think this is a preview for Uvalde in some ways. Yes. I imagine this trial will influence charging decisions in Uvalde.
It's no problem.
Okay, sure.
I-
Sorry about that.
No problem, no problem. Ms. Lippel, again, you just said a few moments ago it was classroom 1255, so I'm going to use my finger here and point to 1255, is that correct?
That's correct.
All right, and would Mr. Beagle's classroom be 1256?
Yes.
Which is right next door? All right, and this, as you see over here, would be the east stairwell?
Yes.
All right, and coming over here to this side, this would be the west stairwell.
Yes.
Do you know what's in this area right up above my finger there?
That's the teacher's lounge.
Okay. And with the numbering, can you tell, is there a number assigned to where the bathrooms are?
Oh, for the students' restrooms? Yeah,
Yeah.
1247 and 1248.
Okay, those are the and I'll try to use my finger here. Okay, 1247 and 1248, those would be the restrooms?
Yes.
And do you remember when you were evacuating, you said that you did see a Meadow and another girl lying on the ground? Where on this photograph?
Oh, there's a lot of differences
on
between
this,
Texas and Florida
depiction that
with
would
respect
have
to
been-
this in Uvalde. There's a lot of
Yes,
differences.
they were in front of
But this is, to the best of my
1249 and
knowledge, the first
1250.
time a police officer has been
So in
charged for failure to
In
act.
the alcove.
in this kind of situation.
That's between,
So I
there's a
think the
little
outcome of
partition
this
there.
trial will influence Texas for sure.
And
There's a lot of
I
differences
believe you
legally and
also said
factually,
that
but
you saw
I still think
Joaquin.
it's going to be a major
Yes.
thing.
And where was Joaquin?
in 1247.
Okay, the men's room, 1247 over
Yes.
here? All right. I believe you also said you saw Peter Wang. Where was-
Yes, he was at the very end of the hallway, all the way on the west side, against the wall.
So would that sort of be between the entrance to the teacher's lounge and the entrance to the west stairwell?
Yes,
And am I pointing in
That's
basically
correct,
the right
yes.
direction? Okay. I believe you also testified earlier that Jamie Guttenberg, you found out later she had been moved, but at one point she was, do you remember where?
she was like where 1200A is,
Okay.
from what, I didn't see it, I didn't see her, but I heard that that's where she was.
On the landing, sort of out?
Correct.
Out here. Right. Okay, thank you. Judge, may I approach the witness?
You may.
Ms. Lippel, I want to show you what's been marked as states W for identification. This is a composite of 6 pictures. Could you just, to yourself, quickly look through them and see if you recognize that these are the pictures you looked at earlier today?
Yes,
And do you recognize every one of those pictures?
I do.
Do they fairly and accurately represent the people that are in those pictures?
Yes,
And you know who those persons are?
yes.
At this time, Judge, I'd like to move state's composite W into evidence.
Any objection?
No objection.
Without objection, states W for identification will now be in evidence. That is states Exhibit 23, a composite exhibit of 6 photos.
And with the court's permission, I would like to publish, please.
You may.
Ms. Lippel, can you please tell us what we're looking at in this photograph?
That is Meadow Pollock.
And was Meadow one of your students?
She was.
And that you already stated that you saw her at the end, after the incident?
I did.
In the hallway, correct? She had
Yes.
been shot.
This evidence has no evidentiary value.
Do you
This is just
recognize
tugging
the
at
photograph
heartstrings.
that's currently being displayed?
That's Peter Wang.
And Peter was the one you just told the jury a few moments ago was at the end of the hallway between the teacher's lounge and the doors to the west stairwell.
Yes,
And he had been shot. Did
Yes.
you hear?
yes.
Ms. Lippel, do you recognize the person depicted in this picture?
That's Kara Loughran.
And again, did you see Carol Laughlin after you left your classroom?
I did.
And had she been shot?
Yes.
And Ms. Lippel, do you recognize the person in this photograph?
That's Jamie Guttenberg.
All right, and we went through that you did not see her, but you had learned later on that she was on the landing at the third floor west stairwell.
Correct.
And Ms. Lippel, do you recognize the person in this picture?
That's Scott Beagle.
And he was the teacher in the classroom next door, correct?
Yes,
And you saw that he had been hit by gunfire when he left the
yes,
classroom.
I did.
And I have one last photograph. Do you recognize who's in that photograph?
That's Joaquin Oliver.
Was Joaquin in your class,
Yes,
as was Meadow?
correct.
And you saw Joaquin when you left your classroom,
I did.
and he had been shot.
Yes.
Judge, at this time, I would like to show the witness what is already in evidence as states 6. It's a composite, and it would be, sir, F4 from that composite.
You want to play F4 of State's Exhibit 6, which is the camera labeled number 23?
Yes,
Is
sir.
that correct? Okay, you may proceed.
Thank you. Oh, and this would be sensitive.
Understood. Or Deputy Unit, please let me know when all the TVs are on. Okay, very good. You may proceed.
I don't really object to the prosecution using this kind of testimony. I just hope they have actual substance. I've heard rumors of a videotape. It's like, now would be a good time to bring that in, you know? It's like we have enough emotional testimony at this point, don't we? Yeah, and Uvalde was more than 40. It was a lot. Yeah, there was a lot of officers there. Uvalde is a very fucked up situation. I want to run for prosecutor and prosecute literally everyone. Let God sort it out. That's what I
Yes,
want to
that's
do. I don't know if I can convict everyone or not, but I'm certainly going to give it a college try. People of the state of Texas versus about 700 defendants. It's going to be the biggest criminal trial in the history of ever. We'll have to rent out a special room for them all.
Thank you. And
There's an auditorium or something so we can get all the defendants in the room at the same time.
that's you, and just opposite from you is Scott Beagle.
Yes.
Thank you very much.
Mr. Klinger, are you done with your
I
examination?
just one last thing, if the court would allow me.
I just wanted to ask, the photographs that I showed you earlier, the light photographs of the 6 people, they were all on the 3rd floor, correct?
Correct.
Okay. Cross-examination, you may proceed.
Ms. Lippel, I'm so sorry that you went through this trauma. I'm going to try to get you off as quickly as possible. The sounds that you heard were muffled popping sounds, correct?
Correct.
At no point did you or anyone around you seem to think these were gunfire shots, correct?
No one around me directly. Correct.
And that was the first round of gunfire that you hear, correct? You thought they were muffled popping sounds?
Sounded like popping sounds, like balloons popping.
I believe all civil claims relating to this have already been settled.
Cart going over.
I don't think there's any outstanding
Yes.
civil claims.
Okay. But Definitely not gunfire, correct?
Would not be a context for me at that moment.
And you believe that those shots were coming from outside of
Yes.
the 1200 building, correct?
That is correct.
And you believed that it was between somewhere the 1200 building and the 700 building outside, correct?
That's what I thought.
And then the second round of gunfire occurred, correct?
The second popping sounds, I assumed was coming from the same location.
And it was the same type of muffled popping sound,
Yes.
correct? Not like gunfire, correct?
That's correct.
And you also believe that it wasn't coming from inside the 1200 building, but outside the 1200 building, correct?
Yes,
And you even thought that it was coming from somewhere between the 700 building and the 1200 building outside, correct?
yes,
You never obviously would have let your students go onto the third floor and evacuate onto the third floor if you thought that there was a shooter in the building, correct?
of course not.
And one final question. When you left your room for the fire alarm, you brought your keys with you, correct?
I did. They were around my neck.
You're trained to bring your keys out of your classroom and not leave them inside,
It's not
correct?
really part of training. We have lanyards with keys, and standard procedure is we wear them around our necks. Some teachers wear them in their pockets.
But you definitely bring them outside the classroom, or else your kids won't be able to get back into the classroom if you have to go back in, correct?
Correct.
I thank you for 2 decades of service for our children. Thank you.
Thank you.
Be well.
Based on that, any redirect? No. Is the witness excused?
Another emotional witness with no substance.
While
Annoying
students
to
are in
me.
that state, you may call your next witness.
It's like I want to understand what happened. I don't need more heartstrings. I got the heartstring memo. Let's move on.
You want to play the end of F3 of State 6 that you just paused with the witness present?
Yes, sir, at 4.
F4. Okay. Yeah, that's fine. Go ahead.
Thank you. At this time, the state will call Brett.
Go ahead, sir.
Hello, good morning. I'm awake.
Sir, if I could have you come all the way up here to the witness stand, please. Once you reach it, but before you have a seat, you can just stop and look at me, please. Raise your right hand. You swear to tell the truth, whole truth, nothing but the truth.
I do, sir.
Please be seated. And sir, once you're seated, if I can get you to.
There was a
scoot
music
back
video?
As far as it will go.
What music video?
State your full name and spell your full name.
Detective Brett Schroy, B-R-E-T-T. Last name is S-C-H-R-O-Y.
Mr. Cleaver, you may inquire.
Thank you, sir. Detective, can you please tell the jury what you do for a living?
I'm a detective with Coral Springs Police Department. I typically handle financial crimes.
How long have you been with the Coral Springs Police Department?
Just short of 14 years.
Did you have any prior law enforcement service prior to joining Coral Springs?
I did not.
Did you have any prior military service?
I did 7 years, both as an enlisted man and as an officer.
All right. And when you left the service, what was your title?
First lieutenant.
Yes, Detective Schroy.
Let me call your attention to the afternoon of February 14th, 2018.
This is first name. Rhett Schroy.
15 in the afternoon, maybe a little bit later, right in that time. What were you doing?
I was on the
Yep.
second floor of the Coral Springs Police Department in the Detective Bureau.
And could you tell us or give us an estimate of how far away the Coral Springs Police Department is from Marjory Stoneman Douglas High School?
I would say probably 3 to 4 miles.
Were you there by yourself, or did you have anyone else with you?
We all have our own separate cubicles.
How much
but
potential time?
there was
95
probably
years.
a dozen detectives that were in the room at the time.
And while you were there in the room that afternoon, did anything unusual happen?
A call came out over the radio. It was very benign the way it came out. It was almost like everybody at once stood up in their cubicle and said, "Wait a minute, what? What did they just say?" So it was very surreal.
All right. And what did that call cause you to do?
That call, first of all, Detective Pena, who sits in the cubicle next to me, knowing that my son attended Marjory Stoneman Douglas, said, "Dude, active shooter at Stoneman Douglas." And I don't particularly remember how I got down several flights of stairs into my vehicle.
And that came over your radio, your dispatch?
It came through Coral Springs Dispatch, yes.
Let me ask you, I know it's difficult. Did you know at that point, where your son was in high school?
No. Building numbers or anything of that nature would not have meant anything to me at that point. I certainly didn't have my son's schedule memorized, so I wouldn't have known if he was in the 1200 building or any other building.
And you know, was he a freshman or sophomore or junior?
He was in his 10th grade year.
Sophomore.
Yeah.
So when you got downstairs, what did you do then?
I jumped immediately into my car. Some other people were donning their vests, getting their rifles out. I wanted to get there as quickly as I could, so I just jumped in the car and I went.
So would it be correct that you didn't, at that point, put on your vest or get your gun?
No, and at that point, I was a fairly new detective, and often the cases, they give you the rottenest cars that have the guns that are in the back in a hard case. So the gun was in the trunk, and my vest was on the back seat at the time.
All right, and let me ask you, prior to being a detective, what did you do for the Coral Springs Police Department?
I worked both in patrol and I was a bicycle officer.
Have you ever been an SRO?
I've never been an SRO.
Can you tell us if you remember how long it took you to get, you said about 3 to 4 miles, how long it took you to get to Marjory Stoneman Douglas High School?
It took several minutes to get there. Luckily, the fire department had gotten the call actually a couple minutes before we did, and it actually started to close down intersections, which allowed us to not have to wait for a green light. But as I approached the school, there were parents in the roadway, cars parked in the roadway. It took a little bit to get around vehicles to get close to the school.
From your son's schedule, were you aware when school was slated to end during the week? What time school would end on a daily basis?
Like 2:30, 3 o'clock, somewhere in that nature.
Somewhere in that area?
Yeah, somewhere in that area.
All right, and if you recall, do you know what time it was when you arrived at Marjory Stoneman Douglas High School?
Absolutely not. It's difficult. There was a lot of things going through my brain as I was driving, what I was going to do, whether I was going to try to go attempt to find my son, if I was going to go attempt to locate the shooter and kind of address the shooter, and by addressing the shooter, save everybody while saving my son. So I wasn't thinking about time. I was just thinking about getting there, getting out, getting my equipment, and addressing the threat.
And you said things were going through your mind.
Was there, in your mind, any question as to whether you were going to save your son or whether you were going to go after the shooter?
Within a few seconds, I had determined the best course of action was to save him by saving everybody else. So,
Did there come a time later on that you realized about what time you had arrived at the school?
I've been told I arrived about 10 minutes after the last shot.
So, at what part of the campus did you actually, or let me put it this way, excuse me, strike that. In what area of the campus did you leave your vehicle?
There's a scrolling sign that's kind of the middle, let's say southeast corner of the campus, a scrolling sign that does announcements for basketball games or dances or whatever, and that's kind of where I parked. There's reasons that I did that. I saw there was a large amount of vehicles that were parked on the northeast corner. I kind of assumed that's where the problem was, but as I had stated, at that point, I neither had my vest nor my rifle.
All right. I'm just going to quickly show you. Actually, excuse me, these are a little large. What it was, it's defense F for identification. Excuse me, out of order.
If you could just point out for the jury, if you recognize this map, where you saw, you said there was a lot of traffic in one corner of the school?
Yeah, the majority of the traffic was up in here, in this area.
Okay, near
So-
Pine Island and
Holmberg.
okay.
So there's a scrolling sign somewhere in this neighborhood. Again, there was cars parked all over the place. It kind of limited my ability to really pick a good spot. So I just kind of rolled to a spot, jumped out, and started to get my equipment out.
Okay, thank you.
All right, so when you say you got your equipment out, can you further explain to the jury what you're talking about?
We're all issued a vest. As a detective, you can imagine I'm upstairs. The cases come to me. I'm not dealing with the public. I'm not dealing with the bad guy. So our vest is kept typically inside our vehicle. When we go to a hot call, we would throw that vest on. So that vest was behind me in my back seat. I had mentioned previously, if you look in police cars, a lot of times the guys can grab the rifle right above them. It's in a rack. They press a button, they can pull the rifle out. Because I was in an older car, my rifle was in a lockable box, which is in the trunk of my car, so I had to get it out that way.
Okay. And where was the vest located?
Behind me in the back seat.
Steve.
When earlier, before you became a detective, you were on road patrol and bicycle patrol, would you wear your vest all the time?
100% of the time.
And why would you do that?
You just never know what's going to happen, so it's better to have it on and not need it than to need it and not have it on.
A minute ago, you said a hot call. Am I correct?
Yes.
Can you explain what you mean by a hot call?
One that I guess there would be an element of danger. It's not uncommon for me to go and interview people without a vest. You know, it's kind of this calm down situation where I'm not talking to a suspect. Under those circumstances, I might not put on a vest, but this is certainly one that a vest is necessary.
So you leave your car at that location?
Yes, I did.
All right. And where do you go?
Initially, I wanted to go towards where the majority of the cars had been formed up in that northeast corner. But almost immediately when I grabbed my rifle out, Sergeant DeRosa, who's at that time was in the Detective Bureau, grabbed me and said, "Hey, you're with me." So we didn't know where the shooter was. It was his idea to start forming teams to start searching.
Right. And in the chain of command, if he's a sergeant, is he above?
He is, yes.
Okay.
Yep.
So you follow his directive?
Yes, I did.
And I just wanted to make sure, when you say there was a lot of cars up at the northeast corner, that wasn't just police vehicles, it was a mix of vehicles?
It was a mixture of police cruisers from different agencies. It was unmarked cars. It was parents' cars. It was kind of chaos in terms of people walking around in the street. Parents, I'm sure, that were, you know, upset and wanted to know what was going on with their kids.
Upset.
So
That's one
it
word
was
for
just
it, I
a lot of
suppose.
traffic.
All right. Up until this point, when you
Mildly irked,
joined forces,
slightly
speaking of
perturbed.
Sergeant DeRosa, had you heard any shots being fired?
An
At no
eyebrow
point
had been
while I was
raised.
on campus did I hear a shot fired.
All right. And at that point, I don't know if you had time to check, had you heard from your son at that point?
No, I had tried multiple times to get in contact with my son. When I would dial his number, it wouldn't even ring. And I would chalk that up to the amount of traffic and the amount of people that were trying to do the same exact thing.
Okay. Where do you and Sergeant DeRosa go?
Initially, we tried to gain access to the campus. There's a gate almost directly west of where I got out of my car. That was locked and chained, so we ended up going to the main entrance and banging on the doors, getting the attention of a deputy that was inside the administration building, and they let us in.
Okay. So your knowledge, that was the administration building?
To my knowledge, it was, yeah.
Were you aware whether that building had a number or not?
No, and again, even to this day, I'm not sure that outside of one or two buildings, I could tell you what buildings were what numbers.
All right. So what happens when you go up to the administration building?
Well, because we didn't know where the shooter was, as I had mentioned, the idea was to just start clearing until we got more information. So there is an auditorium that was right there. So the first thing that we did was clear the auditorium.
All right. Let me ask you, because I don't want it to get too confusing. I'm going to put that map up again. Do you think you'd be able to identify, at least from looking at the map?
I think so, yeah,
Okay.
I think so.
Yeah, you may, again, this is what's been marked as state defense F for identification. Again, I'm sorry, Madam Court Reporter. Made the witness step down. Sure. To do the identification. All right, if you could just show the jury, let's see, we've got this right here.
This is where I came in, so.
All right.
Initially, we tried to get into a gate that was about right here.
Okay.
I don't know if you all can see that.
I'm sure of it.
Was it located about here? Ultimately, we came in through this area. I'm going to assume that this was the auditorium right here.
Okay. And so this is where you go to clear?
Yeah, this is the building we ended up clearing initially.
All right, great. Could you please explain to the jury what you mean by the word clear?
The auditorium was locked. I ran into an administrator that was outside. He was able to unlock the auditorium. I stuck my head inside. I kind of looked at my hard corners. There was a bunch of students that were in the middle of the auditorium. I called out to them, has anyone seen or heard the shooter? And several of them said no. So at that point, I backed out. I had the administrator lock the door, and I physically went into the bathroom, each stall, to make sure that somebody wasn't hiding inside the bathroom.
Right. So is it fair then to say by clearing, you're not actually clearing people out of the building?
No.
You're doing what?
I'm actually just asking questions. Obviously, I don't want to force people out of the room, out into the parking lot, or into some other area of the school where they might actually get shot. They're actually safer staying exactly where they were. But by using the word clearing, what I'm saying is clearing for the suspect.
Okay, so you clear, you're in your mind, these kids are safe, there's nobody in there who's going to shoot at this.
Right.
So was there an incident after you finished clearing the bathrooms that happened?
We had received intelligence over the radio, on the Coral Springs radio, that the subject was dressed in black pants and a red shirt. When I finished clearing the bathrooms, I noticed that there was a door that led to the theater. There was a spiral staircase that led to the top of the theater. I went to the top of the theater, and a subject that was dressed in black pants and a red shirt was actually hiding in the dark. So I ordered them out. We took them downstairs. the person was cuffed and then escorted away from the scene, and I didn't see that person again.
And I'm presuming that while you're going and getting this person out, because he's wearing something that matches what you had heard, you've got your gun out.
Oh, yes.
And being extraordinarily careful and
Right.
handling that person.
That's correct.
Did you ever find out whether he was a suspect?
Oh, obviously, learned later on, it was just a student that was trying to hide, and that was a good place to hide. So it wasn't the person that we were looking for, but we never know. You wouldn't know if you're in a situation like that and you find somebody huddled in the dark. So that's why he was detained and later cleared.
All right, so is Sergeant DeRosa still with you?
He is. I don't think he came to the top of the stairs. The stairs are quite narrow. He was there when I brought the subject back down.
Okay. So once the subject's taken care of, what do you and Sergeant DeRosa decide to do?
While this is going on, we had also received intelligence that there were wounded subjects at the 1200 building, which really didn't mean anything to me. I didn't know what the 1200 building was, even though my son attended. But when they said the 3-story building, that keyed into me. And at that point, Sergeant DeRosa and myself started moving down the hallway towards the 1200 building.
So again, I want to make sure we have this right, that even though your son attends the school, just the name, 1200 building, that didn't mean anything to you?
It didn't at that point, no.
Okay, but when you heard 3-story, that clicked in.
Right, because that's the only 3-story building. I believe he also said northeast corner as part of his transmission.
All right. So at that point, then you begin. Let me ask you this. We talked about a little earlier that by the time you arrived at the school, the shooting had been over for let's say 10 minutes. I believe you said.
Yes.
Now some more time has obviously gone by. You've cleared the auditorium and you've taken care of the suspect. How much time now would you estimate has elapsed if you added on to that 10 minutes?
I'd say another 10 or 12 minutes at least.
Okay, so give or take 20 to 22 minutes since the shooting ended.
Correct.
Okay. All right. So what happens next then with as you go? If I've got it right, north.
We're going north through the hallway, passing the 700 building, approaching the 1200 building that I can see across a grassy area. I encountered the person that I knew as the SRO. I did not know his name, but I did recognize him.
And how were you able to recognize him?
Just from attending sporting events and that type of stuff, it wouldn't have made sense for me to ask my son, "Who's your SRO?" You know, I'm a cop myself, so I just recognized him from being around the area on previous sporting events.
Okay, football games, whatnot.
Right.
Now, just before you said you saw the SRO, you said I was able to see ahead. Were you able? Did you have a clear view of the east end of what now is the 3-story building?
Yes, I did.
Building?
Yeah.
What were you able to see, if anything, there?
At that point, there was already people making entrance from the east end. Cops were already making entrance. Students were exiting the building at that point.
Okay, so when you say people entering, you mean law enforcement?
Law enforcement.
Okay. Were you able to tell if that was Broward Sheriff's Office or Coral Springs or a combination thereof?
I think it was a mixture of both. Yeah.
Is there a difference in uniforms between what BSO wears and what Coral Springs wears?
Absolutely. The gentlemen that are on the side over there are dressed in BSO uniforms, which are typically dark green, whereas Coral Springs is dark blue.
All right. And today you are wearing a Coral Springs uniform?
I am wearing Coral Springs uniform.
All right. And it is, best I can tell, dark blue.
Dark blue.
Okay.
Dark blue or black. You take your choice.
All right. All right, so you're able to see that law enforcement is entering the building and also that students are being extracted from the building.
That's correct.
All right. Do you speak with, now I know you said you didn't know his name, but you knew him to be the SRO. Did you speak with the SRO at that point?
I did. I ran ran up to him, and I had to pause, I had to wait. He was either speaking on the radio or attempting to speak on the radio when I first went up to him.
And let me ask you, when you first went up to him, did you take any type of let's say, tactical position? Were you, your body, were you standing up straight, or were you doing something else?
No, as I recall, it was kind of like a crouched position, like, hey, I'm not really sure about walking out into this open area. I'm trying to make myself, I'm kind of tall to begin with, so I was trying to make myself a little bit smaller, not knowing where the shooter actually was.
Could the officer, please, I'm sorry, the detective step down for a moment and just show the jury what type of position you were in?
Holding a rifle either in my right or my left hand. It would be kind of like this, make myself small type of thing, just to get within earshot of him so I could ask him a question.
And how tall are you, sir?
6'2".
Thank you. Thank you, Judge. Now, I believe you said the reason for that was because, well, let me scratch it. Let me ask you, during that time period when you left the auditorium and had secured the subject that you had found hiding up there until the time that you spoke with the SRO, had you heard any shots go off?
No, no shots.
Okay. So tell us now what you had said to the SRO.
Thank you, DSN, for the super sticker. Sorry I
seemed
didn't
very
acknowledge
busy,
you
he seemed
earlier.
very agitated, obviously.
Thank you for that. Appreciate it.
I waited to what I thought there was a pause.
We appreciate everyone who supports the channel financially. It makes a huge
recognizing that
difference.
he's the
Thank you.
SRO. He's been there the whole time.
Thank you for the 357
He
of
would
you
be
who are
the most
currently here
knowledgeable
joining.
about
Just
the
a kind
location of the
reminder for
shooter.
those of you
I
who have
asked
social
very
media to
simply,
please retweet
where
the
is the
pinned
shooter?
comment. If you don't have the Twitters, other social media will be fine.
He did.
Thank you
He
very much.
pointed at the
It makes a
1200
huge
building and
difference
said he's on the third
with
floor.
getting out word about the channel.
So other than what you had heard earlier, this is the first in real-time intelligence that you're receiving?
Yes.
Did you have any knowledge of where, obviously the SRO is telling you that, do you have any knowledge or know where that he was getting that from? Did he tell you that?
I didn't want to burden him with a
If
bunch
Grindr
of
will
questions.
help me
I
get
felt he
people
was the
subscribed
most
to the channel, feel
knowledgeable, so
free to
when he
share
told
on
me
Grindr
that,
too.
I took that at face value.
I don't know
and
if I'm
went
Grindr's
back
kind
to
of
my-
audience, but I'll take anything.
So
Everyone can
I wanna
learn
make sure
from
that
law.
you're clear. In your mind, from that intelligence, you are believing that there's a shooter, not necessarily firing, but a shooter inside the 1200 building on the third floor.
That's correct.
And you've also, as you testified, you've already seen Coral Springs and maybe other agencies entering from the east end of the 1200 building, correct?
That's correct.
All right, so what then do you do?
I was trying to think to myself, how can I be most useful? I knew that entry had already been made to the building. About that time, a radio transmission had come across Coral Springs, Maine, saying that he had shot the windows out. So
Who did you take that to mean had shot the windows?
the shooter, which, later we found out was Cruz, but, at that point, we didn't have an ID on the subject. So my assumption was that the shooter had shot out the window, or several windows.
I don't mean to interrupt, but
Yeah.
I'm trying to get through it step by step here, and so forgive me for interrupting, but did you know where those windows were that supposedly were shot out?
I don't think they had said at any point, the third floor window, second from the left, or anything like that. It was just that windows had been shot out.
Okay. All right, again, sorry to interrupt, go
Yeah.
ahead. What were you doing?
So I was trying to think to myself, how could I be most useful? I had mentioned you didn't want to have too many officers going into the building.
Nothing particularly interesting, Sandra
particularly
McBudden, so
from
far.
both sides, because you have
Mostly
crossfire
kind
type
of the same thing we've been hearing before.
Can you explain that just a little more in
Sure.
specific?
If you can think about a building and there being access on both ends, if the bad guy was in the middle and did something that would require us to shoot at him, both sides would be shooting at the subject and in effect shooting at each other.
So
That's what I mean by
something obviously
crossfire. Right.
needs to be avoided.
Right, that needs to be avoided.
Okay, and then you did what?
So Sergeant DeRosa and I had a quick meeting. We talked about the fact that it's possible that he could be using those windows to shoot at first responders as they
Teacher,
went into
officer,
the
student on
building.
rotation. That's
I
mostly what
looked
we've been
to my
hearing here,
south.
right?
There
It's
was
Murray.
the
Marie.
700 building. There was a
Apparently,
exterior
there exists a tape
staircase.
of the defendant's
We
activities. That would be a
cleared
lot
our
more
way to the
helpful at
top
this
of the
point.
staircase. My idea was I would be able to watch the building from that elevated position. If the shooter was to shoot at first responders, I would be able to shoot back and
I'm going to
keep
have to
him
stop
from
you.
doing
I've
it.
got a couple of questions lined up. And
Isn't there a Supreme Court ruling explicitly stating police officers have no duty to help anyone regardless of any contract or law to the contrary? Not in a civil context, yes.
Yes.
Well, I don't know about contract. Law to the contrary, yes.
30, 40
Contract, I
yards.
don't think about that, but those are all civil cases.
Where
I'm not aware of
is
any
SRO
criminal
in
case on
relation
point.
to you when you're
Also,
going
qualified
up
immunity
that
doesn't apply for the
stairwell
same
to
reason.
get
Qualified immunity only extends to
He's
civil
still in that same
contexts.
position that I had left him, which is kind
Thank you
of
for the super chat.
between the 700 building and the 1200 building.
All right, but is he in a, is he out in the open, or is he sort of in a somewhat enclosed area?
He's in the open. It kind of struck me strange that he was not adopting that same idea that I was, that it was kind of bent over as I made movements to try to make myself small.
You testified that you've seen the SRO at football games. Is he a tall gentleman?
I'd say he's at least as tall as I am.
All right. And can you describe, as far as his physical position, you know, whether you just said he wasn't bent sort of down like you were?
Yeah,
Was he standing up straight
he was.
the whole time?
I don't know if anything happened to the cameraman who showed the juror's face. I'm not aware of anything,
As I
so
recall, he did have his
not sure
pistol
what the court
out
did in
and
response
had
to
a
that.
radio in the other hand.
And do you recall
If
what
anything.
type of pistol that was?
I believe that BSOs issued Glocks, I believe.
So you get up to you climb up to the second level of the 700 building, or the classrooms. Do they face, is there an interior, did you know if there's an interior corridor or do the classrooms face out onto the?
You're talking about the 700
Yeah.
building? I don't know.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't know.
When you get upstairs, what do you do? Sergeant DeRosa still with you?
He's still with me, yeah.
What do you do when you get upstairs?
So I found kind of a platform to rest my rifle on. I kind of took a deep breath, and I'm looking at all the windows from east to west, and in almost every window, the blinds were moving in every window. I think I had made a comment to Sergeant DeRosa, you know, this is impossible. Like, I can't see through the window. When I heard the report that the window had been shot out, in my mind, I was thinking of the window completely being missing. Obviously, if it has bullet holes in it, you can't shoot through the window, or you can't put a gun through the window. So as I'm looking, I didn't see that situation. I did see some windows that had some bullet holes in it, but I didn't see that there was a window completely broken out.
So in your mind, there's a difference then between maybe what was said over
The idea there's a new
over
cameraman
just
is not
that
exactly
seeing in that there's no
unlikely.
window broken out. No,
Correct.
There's no glass at all.
Shot versus shot out, yeah,
Okay, so one being completely
right.
gone, glass completely gone. The other, glass still in place, but shattered, maybe spider webs,
Right.
glass, whatnot.
Correct.
You stated you're at a distance of, I think you said 40 or some odd yards from the 1200 building. You see those blinds, any reason in your head why those blinds might be moving?
I thought that the blinds could be moving because the students were in there. I thought the blinds could be moving because the officers that had made entry were moving the blinds. Of course, there's always that possibility that it could have been the shooter that was moving the blinds. But without knowing who was who, any attempt on my part to shoot at the shooter, I don't know what was beyond him. So I could have been shooting students. I could have been shooting other officers. So I quickly concluded that I needed to find a different job. that wasn't going to get it done.
Okay. Well, let me ask you though, before we move on, the distance, was that a factor in why you could not see in those windows?
It was very light outside and very dark inside the building. And I believe that there's also tint on the windows as well as the blinds, so you just couldn't see inside.
So, and you're not up against the window, sort of cupping your
No.
hands over your eyes to stop the glare and looking in the window.
Correct,
You're back, you're over in the 700.
correct.
All right, so just not possible for you to be able to tell what's behind those windows.
That's correct.
Okay. So when you make that decision that the tactical position that you took was not helpful, in your opinion, what did you do then? What did you do then?
I said to Sergeant DeRosa, let's go over to the 1200 building, either start to help rescue kids or we'll help to clear the building, whatever we can do. We need to be more useful than what we're doing right now.
Okay, and what did you, so in order to accomplish that, what did you do?
We ran we came down the stairs and we ran across that open area and we ended up settling at the east side of the 1200 building.
All right, and at that time that you ran over to the east end of the 1200 building, had the SRO moved from his initial position where you had seen him?
No, I believe he was where we had first seen him.
Let me ask you, as you're running across it's an open area, correct? From the 700 to the 1200 building?
Yes.
Were you worried about sniper fire?
I had mentioned earlier, I'm fairly tall, so I tried to make myself small. So obviously it was in my mind, but up until that point, I had never heard a shot fired since I had been on the campus.
What? You hadn't heard a shot fired. What would have had to have happened for you to have thought there was sniper fire?
I suppose there would have been bullets kicking up dirt around where I'm standing. Bullets would have been bouncing off the building behind me, that audible crack as a round passes over my head. Some of those things would lead you to believe that you're being shot at.
Did you learn that from your police training or your military training or a combination of both?
Kind of combination of both.
So would it be fair to say at that point you were not at all concerned about sniper fire, even though you had to report about the broken window?
Yeah, I wasn't worried about sniper fire at that point.
All right. So when you make it over to the east end of the 1200 building, what happens then?
There was a number of deputies and officers. I saw Officer Capri, who I had worked in the bike unit with. I wanted to get in the fight. I grabbed him by the collar and I said, "Come on with me, we're going in." And
I'm going to have to stop you there because I want to know why you want to do that. What thinking is causing you to do, you to say, I want to go in?
I think it's a combination of things. It's wanting to save my son, wanting to save other people's sons and daughters. It's what we signed up to do. It was our Super Bowl. You could say, if you weren't ready for that day, when would you be ready?
How did the information that the SRO had relayed to you figure into that decision that you wanted to go in?
Can you restate?
Earlier you told us that when you finally talked to the SRO, you didn't want to bother him, then you talked to him.
Yeah.
He had told you, can you tell us again, what did he tell you?
He pointed at the 1200 building and said, he's on the 3rd floor.
Okay. So how did that figure into why you
I figured this was the opportunity to put this to an end.
What happens next?
I had grabbed Officer Capri by the back of the collar, and I said, this was somebody that I trusted. It's a good friend of mine. And I wanted to get in there. And I said, come on, let's go. And Sergeant DeRosa heard what I said, and he grabbed a hold of me and said, no, they're making entry from the west side. I don't want crossfire. So we stayed at the base of the steps that on the east side of the 1200 building.
Okay, so at that point now you know that law enforcement has entered the 1200 building from the far side, the west side of the building.
Correct.
Right? Okay. And in your head at this point, the shooter is up on the third floor?
Correct.
Okay. So you are now where? Are you inside the building at this point?
I started off kind of inside the stairwell after I got rebuked and told, no, we're not going inside. I came outside and was kind of standing at the corner of the building, trying to keep an eye on windows, trying to find something to do that would make me valuable.
How did you get rebuked?
What I mean is when Sergeant DeRosa said, no, you're not going in, we're going in, they're going in on the west side. So it's kind of like, stop what you're doing.
Okay, because does that relate back to what you told us earlier about you don't want crossfire blue?
That's
on
correct.
blue? Okay,
Yeah, that's
officers possibly injuring other officers
Correct.
on the same floor.
Correct.
Okay, makes sense.
Right.
So, again, then what happened next?
So it was being relayed to us that the shooter had thrown his rifle down, had taken off his gas mask, and was walking down the stairs.
And what is your response to that information?
I basically ran inside, got at the base of the steps, and I thought, okay, here it is. This is why I'm here.
So now you are inside the building.
I'm inside the building.
Are you inside on the first floor or are you in the stairwell? Do you remember?
I'm at the base of the stairwell, which is kind of separated from the rest of the first floor.
And that's the east stairwell.
The east stairwell.
And what happens at that point?
We're waiting, and then all of a sudden they tell us he's out on the ground, he's running west.
Now, describe for us what kind of effect that had on you.
It actually kind of scrambled my brain because I thought, how in the world did this person get past us?
You're waiting for him to come down that stairwell and you're waiting to kill him.
Yes,
And all of a sudden now, the information has changed.
the information changed.
What does that cause you to do?
I know he's running westbound, so I ran out the door and people followed me and we started running parallel to the 1200 building, and I'm focusing my rifle westbound towards the middle school. And we're at the end of the 1200 building. I looked to the right and Coach Feiss had been shot and was laying on the ground. I didn't know Feiss at that point, but that was a gentleman that was laying there. We kept moving westbound, checking every nook and cranny, every bush, every small building, every corner, almost to the Walmart.
All right. I'm going to back up just a little bit. I want to go back for a moment to that time where you decide to make the run from the 700 building to the east end of the 1200 building.
Yes.
That's sort of a reconfiguration of your thinking.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So, if the situation is you're running across, all of a sudden shots are fired. You don't know where those shots are coming from. Would that cause a reconfiguration of your thinking?
I would think that the safest spot would be as tight against the 1200 building as possible. So I would probably keep on running until I got to the 1200 building.
All right. And how long, we're talking about this thinking, the reconfiguration, because now things have changed, right?
Yeah.
Situations changed. You determined, no sniper fire, but now you just heard gunfire. How long, in your estimate, would you stay there in that position reconfiguring?
I'd say a maximum of 5 or 6 seconds trying to figure out where the shot's coming from. Even if this, you said a sniper, this is a sniper scenario, is that what you're saying?
You had eliminated the sniper.
Okay, so it's just
You
shots
eliminated
fired.
that. That's out of,
Okay.
you already described to the jury how you would have known the sniper scenario.
Okay.
That's out of the picture.
Okay, so if it's just standard shots, I can imagine 5 or 6 seconds trying to figure out where the shots are coming from and then moving to where the gunfire is coming from. You know, the idea is the longer it takes for us to get to the shooter, every time the shot is fired, that's a kid being killed.
All right. So you would stop for a moment to figure it out, but you wouldn't stay put, correct?
It's reasonable to, 5 or 6 seconds to try to figure out, where the shots are coming from before, yeah.
And then keep on moving.
And you gotta
towards
keep
the
moving.
sound.
Yep.
All right. Well, so I kind of interrupted you again. I've been doing that a lot today, I guess, and I do apologize. You had made it over to the west side of the 1200 building. Did there ever come a time that day that you saw any windows in that 1200 building completely shot out?
No, there was never any windows that were shot out, just shot.
And did you come to learn that later on?
Yeah, obviously, I didn't do an investigation of the whole building to see that they hadn't been shot out, but I'm told that none were actually shot out.
Because at this point, you're trying to find the shooter. He's supposedly has exited and he's out there going westbound.
Right, so my focus wasn't on the building, it was rather between the building and the middle school.
Okay. So for the remainder of that day, can you tell the jury what you did? Briefly.
When we almost reached the Walmart, we were notified that the people that were communicating the intelligence were watching video that was 20 minutes old. So when we thought we were chasing crews across the field, he had departed that location 20 minutes previously. So he wasn't actually there. So the rest of the time that I spent was going back, because you're never sure if there's another shooter or if that information was correct. We went back and I started going classroom by classroom, physically removing that class and escorting them to the parking lots.
And was that in buildings other than the 1200 building?
Yes, it was everywhere but the 1200 building, yeah.
And finally, Detective, did there come a time that day when you saw your son?
Yeah, when I got to the 1200 building, I had kind of given up on trying to call him. I had called him about 10 times, and he actually called me. He was in the southeast corner of the campus, and he was huddled with some other students, but at least I knew he was okay. It wasn't until very, very late that his building was the one that was actually released and escorted out to the parking lot. So I saw him very, very late.
Very late that afternoon or early evening?
Yes.
Thank you very much, Detective. I appreciate that.
Thank you.
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, I'm gonna give you a quick restroom break, and then we'll proceed with the cross-examination of the witness. Same admonition as always, please don't discuss the facts of the case, the evidence, the witnesses, or the testimony amongst yourselves or anyone else. If you'll leave the notepads in your chairs and step in the back one moment, I'll be right back with you. Thank you.
Thank you, Crystal. I try to get it right as best as I can.
Okay, we're outside the presence of the jury. Everyone can be seated. Real quick, 5-minute restroom break. Sir, if you're comfortable, you can stay right there.
Okay,
If
sir.
you want to step down, I just can't have you talk to anyone about your testimony, and we'll
Yes,
be
sir.
right back as soon as they're back, okay?
Yes, sir.
All right. So yeah, just a brief restroom break right now. So yeah, kind of the same thing we've been hearing. And someone else pointed out, yeah, basically it's just become a cycle of student, teacher, cop without it being very helpful as to what the defendant exactly did. We've heard about particular actions the defendant took in slices of time, but those slices of time seem to conform to what other officers were doing in those slices of time. So we haven't seen the defendant doing something, other than what other officers were doing, because the other officers can only testify to obviously what they personally witnessed. And what they personally witnessed is the defendant acting in conformity to their behavior, more or less. So it seems the to try differentiating is pretty small and thin. So apparently, again, there exists some sort of tape of the defendant acting cowardly behind a car or something for 45 minutes. So at some point, I hope they'll introduce the tape, because right now there is insufficient evidence, to my view. It's just all emotional. It's just all look at this horrible thing that happened. Doesn't really speak to the defendant's liability, in my humble opinion. Wouldn't they show like that, something like that first? I don't know. It depends on their trial strategy in terms of how they want to organize it. Leading with emotion to get the jury interested and make sure they're engaged is not a bad idea. It's been going on for a little while at this point. So like, I think the primer, if you're going to prime that way, I think you more than accomplished your priming. And one would think that you could also use some of the emotional testimony after the tape, because it will hit a little bit differently, having seen the defendant do nothing and then hearing from the witnesses about they were hurt. So I don't know if they're reserving some of that for after the tape, but I would probably sandwich it. Or they're going to save the tape for last, because they think it's their best piece of evidence. There is this idea of primacy and recency. You want to start strong and end strong. So if they don't really have a lot to work with other than the tape, which probably they don't, I don't know, but they don't have a lot to work with other than the tape, then maybe they're doing a primacy recency thing. Start with the primacy of the emotion, get the jury engaged, make sure they're engaged and paying attention and care. And then as your last piece of evidence, bring in the tape. Maybe that's what they're doing. That would make sense, but we don't have enough information right now to adjudicate guilt, not by far. So yeah. And thank you to the person in chat who said they enjoyed my live stream breakdown of the indictment from Trump. I thought it was interesting reading the comments to that, because there were a couple people who accused me of being biased in my response. And I was like, I don't know how much fairer I can possibly be. There are people who are saying like, maybe it's just because of the order of me attacking it, but I was attacking it live, right? I was thinking about it live. And I'm looking for holes as they appear, obviously, because it's the state's case, right? So I'm reading it and looking for weaknesses, because that's how I typically respond to things, right? You read it and you look for weaknesses. The same thing I kind of did when I was breaking down Toddy's lawsuit against KJ, right? Read the complaint and look for weaknesses along the way. Because, they're obviously putting forward their best case, one would imagine. And so you're looking for weaknesses. They're not satisfied by their case. So I don't know if that was the issue, but one person's like, oh yeah, by paragraph 3, you sounded like Trump's defense attorney. I'm like, well, that's kind of how I do this. I look at that and I look for ways to attack, look for holes, and try to tease out the case by looking for areas of attack to try to assess things. And then of course, by the end of the stream, it didn't really matter very much. Every area of attack, every area of doubt I was able to sow along the way. I get to the end, I'm like, yeah, Trump's probably doomed. I didn't quite say it that way, but like, yeah, by the time I get to the end, yeah, I'm like, yeah, all the questions I have and all the doubt I've been able to generate and all the issues I've been able to spot isn't going to matter very much in the end. It's all marginal. And, so I don't know what more people want from me sometimes, but, And then at least for me, at least to my mind, when I did my recap stream the next day, I didn't say anything different. maybe I reorganized it a little bit differently. I was able to front load the conclusion. So I guess it was different in that way because obviously I had read it before, so I'd already had a conclusion at that point. Whereas, like, yeah, things are not looking good for Trump. He's in a negative position. So I was able to start the conclusion. I didn't think it was any different in terms of the information I provided or the information. It was just perhaps reorganized a little differently. But some people were like, "Oh, you were a lot fairer the second time." I'm like, I'm not sure I was any different, but maybe it's just me and my perceptions of things. I still think the page of the indictment where they went over his campaign promises and his promises while he was present relating to classified information was a little silly. I mean, I'm not 100% sure why it's there. It feels unnecessary. It feels like I don't really get it. I guess we're trying to show Trump has an understanding that classified material is important, to show his subjective understanding of the importance of classified information. It just felt funny the way it was presented. I'm not sure if there's a better way to do it. It just felt weird the way it was written. Maybe I was being too hard on them, though. So I'm upset you're not yelling, lock him up. Well, he's in trouble. He's in trouble, is my assessment. Prove Trump's words have meaning? It's a question of a jury. If you can prove he said the words, what that he meant them, how he meant them is up to the jury. What way did he mean them, right? So, yeah, not really sure what the defenses are going to be. You think it's for mens rea that he understands the concept? Maybe. It just struck me as funny the way they put it together. I don't know if there's a better way to do it. I think the fact that they made a point of saying, like, it was during his campaign he made the statements, maybe that was the thing. Like, instead of just saying he made these statements on these dates, it made a point of saying, oh, he's saying this while he was running for office. Just seemed a little funny to me. Oh yeah, Trump embellishes. Oh yeah, for sure. Trump embellishes. Another person who does that a lot I like is Gordon Ramsay. If you ever watch Gordon Ramsay, like when he's talking, it's always like, this is the most perfect cut of steak, the most delicious oyster, the most wonderful sea bass, the most delectable. Everything is the best, right? Everything is almost the best. This is the most encrusted clam. I mean, whatever, right? So yeah, it always strikes me as funny. I'm not sure everything can be the best, but okay. Admitted false statements to get warrant. I don't know if that's true or not, but okay. Wrong jurisdiction for grand jury. No, I don't think so. The possession occurred here. I think it's the right jurisdiction. Article 2, executive privilege. Executive privilege is a non-issue because he wasn't executive at the time. So I don't see any of those defenses working. I'm not aware of any false statements to get the warrant. I think this is the correct jurisdiction for the grand jury. Executive privilege is a non-issue. Yeah. Sandra says, I think your political legal analysis is fair and objective. You're the only content creator I watch when it comes to political analysis of legal matters. Yeah. Yeah. Executive privilege is a non-issue. Pardon power is a non-issue. Presidential Records Act is a non-issue. Yeah. The courts have determined no civil rights were violated, which is generally necessary to overcome a police officer's sovereign immunity. Sovereign immunity, well, first of all, sovereign immunity only belongs to the state level apparatuses, not
Ready to
local.
proceed?
So I don't
Defense, ready to
believe that he's a
proceed?
state level officer, so there's no sovereign immunity issues. Second of all, this sovereign immunity is an aspect of the state's right. So the state can waive it because it's the state's immunity. So there's that. And third of all, I'm not sure the degree to which sovereign immunity applies in the criminal context, so I don't think that's the issue here. This case feels very political. May well do. Deidre says, I really know my shit. I try to pay attention. Qualified immunity is a non-issue because this is criminal. Qualified immunity is a civil law concept, not criminal. Qualified immunity is irrelevant. Castle Rock is irrelevant. Sovereign immunity is probably not existent because he's not state level, he's local. So there's no sovereign immunity. Even if he was, it's the sovereign that's going after him. So, no. Trump doesn't have a lot of great defenses. We tried to pick apart the edges, but I can't see anything that's really great. Trump is in a lot of trouble. No, that's okay. Greater ramifications are problematic. Yeah, the greater ramifications are problematic. One would imagine this would increase political temperature. One would imagine this would increase the likelihood of going after former political candidates. Right? The fact that you open that can of worms and have the administration going after a prior administration really just, it really raises an uncomfortable specter. Searching beyond the warrant scope, good luck.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back. Come on in. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back. Come on in. Once you're back in those seats, you may be seated. All the parties may be seated. Ladies and gentlemen, those of you using the notepads, I'll give you a moment to get your notepads back out. All right, ladies and gentlemen, when we took our quick restroom break, we had just concluded the direct examination of the witness. We'll pick it up with the cross-examination of the witness at this point. Mr. Igarsh, when you are ready, you may proceed.
Thank you, Your Honor. Steve?
Will we get anything out of this cross and we haven't already gotten out of? I don't know.
Good afternoon, Detective.
Good afternoon.
This is the second time that we've met before, correct?
I believe so, yes.
We had a chance to speak with each other during a deposition back on June 27th, 2022. Isn't that correct?
I'll take your word for the date, but yes.
And you were there under oath the same way you are today, correct?
Correct.
And you promised to tell the truth, the whole truth, correct?
Yes.
And you knew that what you were saying would be transcribed, meaning written down for you to read at a later time, correct?
Correct.
And did you have a chance to read this deposition before you testified today?
I did.
When was the last time you read this?
About a week ago.
Okay. And did you review your testimony with the prosecutor before you testified?
Yes.
You work for Coral Springs Police Department, correct?
Correct.
And you recognize that BSO, Broward Sheriff's Office, is a separate police agency, correct?
Correct.
On a separate radio channel, correct?
That's correct.
And unless the radios are patched, they're not hearing the same thing you are, correct?
That is correct.
Did you know when you got to the scene whether the radios had been patched or not?
I only heard Coral Springs communicating, so I assumed that they had not been patched.
Okay. Did you think that it would have been prudent for somebody to get them patched under the circumstances?
From what I'm told with the problems that BSO was having with their radios, probably adding our radio traffic to it probably wouldn't have helped.
You don't believe that it would have been a good idea under the circumstances for BSO and Coral Springs to be listening to the same real-time intelligence under these circumstances?
If they could get that communication out clearly, what I was saying was, I think with the problems of communicating, it might not have helped.
Okay. So you were sitting at your desk when you got a call that came out about going to the school, correct?
That's correct.
Were you monitoring your radio all the way that afternoon up until the point you got to the school?
Yes, although I was trying to make phone calls to my son, as I said earlier, while I was driving.
So you would have known then from a 2:26:31 transmission that there was an active shooter at Douglas, correct?
Correct.
Objection, hearsay.
Well, yeah, the questions are containing hearsay, but he already answered the question. The objection's overruled. Go ahead, sir. Ask your next question.
Did you also know that there were multiple gunshots being fired?
I believe I did, yes.
And you also knew that the Coral Springs police lines were blowing up with calls, correct?
I wouldn't have known that based on the radio transmission, but I can imagine that they were, yes.
Did you also have, from listening to your radio, a detailed description of what at least one shooter looked like?
Yes.
So you knew you were looking for a white male, correct?
Correct.
In an ROTC uniform, correct?
Possible ROTC with a red shirt and black pants, yeah.
Okay. And you also would have known from you remember Officer Burton
Yes.
speaking? So you would have heard him say that last seen in the 3-story building, north parking lot, correct?
Objection, hearsay.
Yeah, that's hearsay. That's the state. Go
Did
ahead,
you-
sir. Ask another question.
Did you know when you arrived on campus whether the shooter was last seen in the 3-story building
That didn't come until much later.
or north parking lot?
That didn't come until later. When I first arrived, I didn't have a location at all.
Well, you arrived about 10 minutes after the shooting, which would have been about 2:37 p.m., correct?
Again, I'm not able to give times. I didn't look at my watch the whole time, but I can tell you that I learned about the 1200 building when I was in the auditorium.
Does that mean you did not hear the 2:29 transmission made by Burton about 3-story building north parking lot?
I'm saying when I heard that, I was in the auditorium. I didn't hear that before I got there.
Okay. Did you hear or did you know that there were 3 victims down in the 1216 classroom in the freshman building? Did you hear that at 2:29:47?
I don't remember that being identified by classroom, but I remember people saying that there were students that were down, yes.
And so you would have known that at 2:29:47, which would have been before you arrived on campus, correct?
Again, I can't tell you the times. I can only say when I heard Burton's first transmission was when I was in the auditorium.
I mean, you're a veteran detective. You know how important it is to listen to all the different radio transmissions that go out, correct?
It's true.
You don't choose which transmissions to listen to, correct?
But there are times that you need to put your radio down, like when I'm donning my vest or I'm getting my rifle out. So
Of course.
if those transmissions came out while I was doing that, then I wouldn't have heard that. Plus, it's not plain speak like you and I are talking today. People are talking in very excited voices and
Sure.
talking over each other, so it's not that clear.
So you mean to tell me there's times where you can actually miss some transmissions because people are very excited, correct?
Sure,
We're talking over each other, correct?
that's correct.
It would be unfair to hold someone to every single transmission, correct?
It would be difficult to get every single detail, yes.
Got it. And
Really want to make sure to get that point
when
through.
you arrive on campus, you don't immediately then run to the 1200 building or the northeast parking lot, correct?
That's correct.
Your mindset is that there could be, first of all, multiple shooters, correct?
We didn't know, so that's always a possibility, yes.
And until you can eliminate something, it still has to be a possibility in your head, correct?
That's correct.
We know now, for example, okay, there was one shooter and he was killing people, including children, in the 1200 building, but you didn't know that when you got there, correct?
That's correct.
So everything has to be in play
Everything
until
is
it's
in play.
eliminated.
Yep.
Okay. So one of the possibilities is that there's multiple shooters throughout the campus.
Thank you, Rosie,
correct?
for becoming a
Correct.
non-civilian.
Which
It's
is
appreciated.
why
Thank you very
when
much.
you arrived, you just
Be like
began to
Rosie and hit that beautiful,
systematically
beautiful
go through
join
different
button.
rooms, correct?
That's correct.
And you didn't do single man entries. You had other people with you, correct?
Yes, I did.
And
Buy some
explain to
memberships
the
for other
jurors,
people
when
by
you
hitting the super
walk
chat
into a
button. You can
room,
buy
you
joint
know this far
memberships for
better than
people.
me. When you walk in
That's
the
always
room,
nice.
someone could be to the left, someone could be to the right, correct?
That's correct.
Which is why if you go in single man entry and you pick left and somebody's right, you're dead potentially, correct?
Potentially.
So single man entries are never something that they advise you to do. when you're
Unless
training.
somebody's actively shooting,
I
yes.
understand that, and you know precisely where the shooter's located, correct?
Correct.
Okay. You were going in with at least
Most of the time, 3.
3 people.
Yeah.
And you would go in, and like we see on TV, one side goes like this, one side goes like this, and you're trying to cover the dead spots, right?
Correct.
You don't cover the dead spots, you could be dead, correct?
Correct.
And you're armed wearing a vest, are you not?
Yes,
The vest has some weight to it, does it not?
it does.
And so you make a choice whether you're going to wear it all day. You're adding weight to your body by choosing to wear a vest all day, correct?
Correct. They obviously vary in weight depending on how much protection's in them, but you are making a choice.
And it's also, it becomes hot wearing it all day, correct?
Yes,
And you had in your hand a rifle, not a pistol, correct?
correct.
How come?
Because given a rifle over a pistol, I'll take a rifle every time.
How come?
Because they have more power, they have more range, they're more accurate.
So you see a team, and by the way, when you arrive, the shots had been long gone by then. I mean, there was no shots at all, correct?
Correct.
You don't know what my client went through. You have no firsthand knowledge of what he thought after hearing the shots for 4 minutes and 15 seconds, correct?
Objection calls for speculation.
Yeah, that's sustained. Go ahead, sir, ask another question.
Do you have any firsthand knowledge at all about what my client went through while the shots were being fired?
Same objection, Your Honor.
No,
No.
well, okay, listen, the objection's overruled. Sir, I don't want you to guess. If you have personal knowledge, you can answer the question, or you can say, I don't know.
I don't know, sir.
Okay. You never had any discussions with my client about what he heard,
No.
correct? Where he thought the shots might have been coming from, correct?
That's correct.
All right. So, you did see a team at some point going into the east side of the building, correct?
Yes.
Before that, though, there was a team going in on the west side of the building, correct?
I'm told, I couldn't see them from my vantage point, but I'm told there was.
So we're clear, anybody on the west side, and my client was on the, I'm sorry, anybody on the east side, my client was on the east side, correct?
Yes.
You couldn't see the team entering from the west side, correct?
That's correct.
And did they announce over your radio, hey, we're the west side team, we're going in?
I believe that Sergeant DeRosa was monitoring 2 radios at the time, or was switching back and forth, because he became privy to information that I didn't know. It may have been announced over BSO's radio, but it wasn't announced over Coral Springs.
And so when the east team goes in, you don't join the east team either, correct?
They were already in before I got there.
Okay. And your thought was, I think you told the prosecutor, if you go in and there's 2 teams, one going in from the east and west, there could be crossfire, correct?
That's correct.
And so it's not uncommon for officers not to go, oh, let me just run in, right? Because there could be harm if they do that, correct?
That's true.
This was a very stressful and chaotic scene. Would that be a fair statement?
It was.
It was also very confusing, correct?
Yes.
You have contact with my client approximately 22 minutes after the last gunfire, correct?
That's correct.
And my client wasn't the only officer standing there. There were several other officers standing by my client, correct?
Yes.
In fact, there was Officer Best standing right next to him, correct?
I don't remember Officer Best being there when I spoke to him. I would have to take your word for it. Danak.
How do you pronounce it?
Danak.
He was there, correct?
He arrived with me. He was
Okay.
a part of the group with me.
And DeVita, correct?
DeVita was also with me.
And so he wasn't, my client was just standing there alone. There were other officers right near him, isn't that correct?
Is your question before I arrived or after I arrived?
Well, would you have known before you arrived what happened?
Well, what I'm saying is they arrived with me.
Mhm.
They just didn't walk up to him and ask him where the shoe was.
So it's fair to say you don't know who was with my client prior to you arriving?
No, I don't.
You can only say there were other officers near my client after you arrived, correct?
That's correct.
Okay. And you said you were crouching down to, quote, make yourself small, correct?
Mm-hmm.
Is that a yes?
That's yes.
Sorry, that noise.
Yeah, no, I got you.
Okay. And you're crouching down because why?
Up until that point, until I ask him where the shooter is, I don't know where the shooter is.
Okay. And crouching down does what? How does that protect you?
It makes me smaller.
Now, if I heard your testimony correctly, you go up to my client and you asked him where the shooter was, correct?
Yes.
And before he gives you an answer, what he actually does is he tells you, hold on, correct?
Yeah, I think I actually paused and waited to ask the question because I think he was communicating on the radio or at least listening to the radio.
It looked as if he was trying to ascertain information to answer your question, correct?
He was talking on the radio.
Okay.
Yeah.
And his demeanor, he was excited and confused, correct?
Yes.
And you thought that was understandable based upon the situation, correct?
Yes, although as a kind of a follow-up to that, the reason I went to him is I recognized him as the school resource officer
Sure.
and the guy that probably would have the most up-to-date information.
Of course. And he seemed not like he was cowering downward, but he seemed very busy, correct?
Yes, correct.
And you wanted to know where the shooter was because you couldn't look up and look through the windows and see where the shooter or shooters were located, correct?
No, that's overruled. Go ahead, sir. You can answer that question.
That's correct. It was impossible to see in the windows from the distance that we were at.
So when my client is able to give you a floor of where the shooter or shooters might be located, that would have, you believed in real time, that would have had to have come from someone giving him that information, correct?
Yes, that would be the only way. Yeah.
Got it. And while you told the prosecutor that you heard my client say third floor, the truth of the matter is he told you second floor. Is that correct?
Well, no, that's overruled. Go ahead, sir. You can answer the question.
The reason that I said the second floor, during one of the depositions, I said, when I was asked that question, I said the second floor, and then I stopped myself and I said, wait a second, that's not right. It might be the third floor.
Okay, I'm unclear what you're saying.
What I'm saying is, when I answered during deposition is what you're referring to, correct?
Yes.
Okay. When I answered during deposition, I realized I answered incorrectly. I stopped myself and I said, no, I don't believe that's correct. I believe you said the third floor.
Is it your testimony that at a prior deposition, you did not say that my client told you second floor?
I just affirmed that I said that during a deposition, I said the second floor and immediately corrected myself and said the third floor.
And you then don't go running into the building at that point, correct?
That's correct.
And the prosecutor asked you about sniper fire, correct?
Yes.
Isn't it a fact that generically, when you arrive to an active shooting situation, you're thinking, unless you know otherwise, that there could be sniper fire, correct?
I suppose. I guess I wouldn't be thinking about defining whether it was sniper fire or regular fire. The reaction is the same. If there's fire, I need to figure out from where and move to it.
Specifically as it relates to sniper fire, is it your testimony that that was out of your mind and not on the table as a possibility?
Oh, sure, it was a possibility. Anything's a possibility.
But that was consciously on your mind, which is one of the reasons why you crouched down, because of potential sniper fire. Isn't that correct, sir?
Again, the distinction between whether I was shot by a sniper or shot by an active shooter, it wouldn't matter. I would be making myself small if I was running across an open area. So I don't know that I would make a distinction. I wasn't thinking I have to crouch over because I don't want to be sniped. I was thinking I didn't want to get shot.
I understand that. There are many ways you could have been shot. We agree, right?
Right.
One of the ways is sniper fire, and that's what I'm talking about right now. You know what sniper fire is, correct?
Absolutely.
The prosecutor discussed that with you, and he seemed to say that was off the table in your head. You heard him say that, correct?
Yeah, that part has been asked and answered. That's sustained. Go ahead, sir. Ask another question.
Isn't it a fact that on your mind consciously was your concern about sniper fire? Yes or no?
Yeah, this objection is sustained. That has been asked and answered. Go ahead, sir. Ask another question.
You even thought specifically in your mind at the time that someone could be shooting out of a window and maybe targeting officers. Isn't that correct, sir?
Objection again, Your Honor.
No, that's a rule. That's a different question. Go ahead, sir. You can answer that.
That's absolutely correct that if the windows were shot out, that they could be shooting at officers, yes. That would be a concern.
And isn't it a fact that you are trained that unless you know precisely where the shooter or shooters are located, that you take a tactical position of cover so that you don't get harmed from those bullets, correct?
That is absolutely correct, as long as there are shots not actively being taken. If there is no shooting going on, then you're correct.
If you don't know at all from the sound where shots are coming from, and we're talking about a scenario where it could cover to the east hundreds of yards, or to the west hundreds of yards, are you saying it is your training to say, okay, I'm just going to start picking places to go? Or do you wait for more information, take a tactical position of cover?
I think it's reasonable that if you're hearing shots fired, you can figure out whether they're being fired at you. And I think the question earlier was how would I know that? There would be dirt kicking up around me, there'd be bullets coming off of the wall behind me. I think it's reasonable you take a couple seconds, even if you dive for cover, like you say, to then try to figure out where the person is and move to the shots.
Did you see any dirt at all where my client was standing?
No?
Isn't it your testimony that your training is, unless you know precisely where the shooter or shooters are located, you are trained to take a tactical position of cover? Yes or no, sir?
As long as shots are not being fired, you're only asking half of the question. If the question is, when I arrive, if no shots are being fired, do I take a tactical position? No. I don't take a tactical position. We do a slow probe and try to figure out where the shooter is. But if shots are being fired, then you have to move to the gunfire.
Yeah. And you're saying that your training includes an area that could be potentially covering hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of yards in either direction, east, west, north, south. If you ever dealt with a situation like that?
Objection has to be answered.
No, that's a different question. Go ahead, sir. The objection is overruled. You may answer the question.
So if I can restate your question, your question to me is, given the size of the area, would I just run to gunfire? Is that your question?
No.
All right, restate it for me if you don't mind.
My question presupposes you don't know where it's coming from, and the possibilities include potentially hundreds of yards
Nate says
that way,
hi.
hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of yards the other direction, same way, including multiple buildings, parking lots, etc. Are you trained to just start picking one place and then just go running off and
No.
trying to guess?
But as I said, I think you take 6, 8, 10 seconds and try to figure out where the shots are going and then move in that direction.
Gotcha. But if there's no further stimulus and you still don't know, you take another 6 to 8 seconds, correct?
So you're saying the shooting has stopped?
Even if the student continues and you still can't tell because of pronounced echo and reverb in an area, and you don't even know what direction.
I guess
That's my
I would
question.
communicate over the radio.
Ella,
Yeah, no, That's overruled. Go ahead, sir, you can finish your answer.
I was gonna say, I think I would communicate over the radio and say, I'm hearing shots, can anybody direct me?
Exactly. So you look to your radio and you see if whether anyone tells you shots fired from inside the 1200 building, correct?
Yes,
You got that intel because you were part of Coral Springs, correct?
yes.
Do you know whether BSO ever gave that real-time intelligence to my client?
I don't know because I wasn't listening to BSO's channel.
At no time when you were there with my client taking a tactical position of cover, did you relay any of your real-time intelligence with him, correct?
No, I did not. There wasn't time. First of all, he was talking on the radio. But again, I said that I thought his knowledge was greater than mine since he was the SRO and he had been there the longest.
And that might not have turned out to be very accurate at all, correct?
It might not have, but I didn't know how much more I could offer. I didn't want to
Okay,
hold up his
we're
time.
back-ish.
You did see my client with his gun drawn, correct?
Yes,
And you saw him communicating and listening to his radios, correct?
Nate wanted the name of the gym I use,
And you believed he was trying to get
'Cause he wants to
real-time
become a member.
intelligence to be helpful, correct?
yes.
so good times.
And one final question. You did see my client after this horrible, horrible day, correct?
I've seen him, yes,
You saw him at a funeral, correct?
yes,
Related to this, correct?
yes.
But you never spoke to him to find out what was he thinking in real time, correct?
Yeah, that's sustained.
Did you have any conversations with my client at any time about what actually happened?
Same objection.
Are you talking about, I don't understand the question, Mr. Agash. Are you
At
talking about
any-
after February 14th, 2018?
Yes, after that date.
That's sustained, that's not relevant.
Okay, thank you, sir.
Based on that, and redirect?
Just a few questions.
Sure, go ahead.
Yeah, dude does need to take it down a notch sometimes. So yeah.
Detective, you were questioned by counsel regarding a pistol versus a rifle. At the time of an active shooting, if the only thing you have is a pistol on you, do you still go toward the shots fired?
I think you have to dance with the person you took to the dance. You know, you elected to have that piece of equipment. Again, every shot that's being fired is a kid being killed, so you have to use the pistol.
And also, you were questioned repeatedly about tactical positions. Would you take a tactical position for 48 minutes? Is that a tactical position to reconfigure your thinking at a proper time frame?
No, I think I had said 6 to 10 seconds, try to recalibrate yourself, figure out what your next move is and move on.
I believe the defense counsel also said to you that it was important to know precisely where the shots are coming from. Do you need to know precisely what the shots are coming from in order to be able to move toward the shots?
No, you don't need to know precisely, and actually, if you're moving on that person and they're paying attention to you and they're trying to get a shot at you, it again benefits the hostages and innocent civilians because he's paying attention to you and not shooting kids. So you can move and force him to move, which is not a bad thing.
And if I got you right, you would force him, in a sense, to shoot at you versus
Correct.
innocent bystanders or innocent hostages.
That's correct.
Then I just wanted to be clear, because again, counsel made a point of saying that.
Yeah, Thomas, I understand that. I like this defense attorney. I wouldn't mind hiring as a defense lawyer. He's a good defense lawyer.
That's correct.
And when
It's
you
a,
got
it's a
there,
minor critique at
Yeah,
this
in
point.
terms
you know.
of gunfire,
shots,
yes.
in terms of gunshots, yes,
Yeah.
correct? All right. So the information about shots or the shooter being inside the 1200 building, that did not come to you until you spoke to the defendant, correct?
There was Officer Burton's communication when I was in the auditorium that identified
Yeah, just don't let them do the opening statement.
people being
Fair enough.
wounded inside
Yeah,
the
or we have to
1,200
rework
building,
the
which I
opening
recognized as a
majorly.
3-story building, but that's when I found out. And then the location of the shooter was then confirmed when I spoke to Deputy Peterson.
Based on that, any recross?
No, Your Honor.
Okay, State, is the witness excused?
Yes, sir.
Sir, you may step down.
Thank you, sir.
very much.
The evidence so far is more
That
emotional
statement,
than
you may call
factual.
our next witness.
Thank you, Your Honor. This time, the state would call Detective Miguel Suarez.
Miguel Suarez. Okay. Miguel Suarez. Yeah, he just needs it like 5% off the top. He's fine on cross. Gets himself into a little bit of trouble. But he's passionate. Probably gets the jury's involvement. Maybe he's trying to do it deliberately, trying to deliberately induce the prosecution to object. Make it seem like they're trying to hide things. Could be part of a strategy. Could be part of a tactical idea. But he is getting a little bit in trouble with the judge, so I don't know. It's not an invalid way to go. I'll probably tone it down a little bit, but that's just a thought from my seat.
Sir, if I could have you come all the way up here to the witness stand, please. Once you reach it, but before you have a seat, you can just stop and look at me, please. Yes. Raise your right hand. You swear to tell the truth, whole truth, nothing but the truth.
I do.
Please be seated. And once you are seated, if I can get you to scoot that chair all the way up as far as it will go. Can you please state your full name and spell your full name?
It's Miguel A. Suarez, last name Suarez.
Miguel?
Miguel, first name.
Mr. Kilren, you may inquire.
Thank you, Judge. Detective Suarez, where do you currently work?
I work at the Broward Sheriff's Office in the capacity of a crime scene detective.
And how long have you worked with the SO?
This will be my 15th year.
And walk me through the progression of the different units you've been in.
I started my first 7 years at the agency as a road patrol deputy in the district of Pompano Beach. And then I interviewed for the position of crime scene detective in the crime scene unit, and I've been here for the last 7 years.
Was that your role on February 14th of 2018?
Yes.
Okay. Now, in regards to what happened at Marjory's team,
Yes, I was.
were there multiple members of that team?
Yes, there was.
Were you tasked with being the crime scene detective on the second floor?
Yes, I was.
Were there other detectives for the first and third floor?
Yes, there was.
So you're just in regards to the second floor?
Yes.
You may.
Detective, I'm showing you what's been previously marked as state X for identification. Is this a fair depiction of, or do you recognize this?
Yeah, it's a floor plan of the second floor.
Second floor of
Building
the
two.
1200 building?
Yes.
Okay, is this a fair depiction of the second floor?
Yes, it is.
Your Honor, at this time, the state would request to move in states X as states.
24. Any objection?
None.
Without objection, state's X for identification will now be in evidence. That is State Exhibit 24.
Your Honor, may I publish?
You may.
Detective, when you are dealing with a crime scene this size, how is
Thank
it
you, Mark, for the super
that
chat.
you break it up?
Things have been going relatively well. Appreciate your contributions to the channel. And appreciate
This
Hamilton for hitting that
this
for hitting that join
particular,
button.
Scene,
Thank you for becoming an uncivilian.
this was probably our second mass casualty event with this magnitude. So usually what you would do is you would try to break up something in this size with different tasks for every detective within the unit.
Okay, and And what were your tasks?
I was tasked, my first task before being tasked out to help out with the second floor, building 12, was a documentation of one of the students at the school. And then from then on there, they tasked me with the second floor.
So on the second floor, what exactly crime scene-wise did you do on the second floor? Did you take photographs?
Yes, I did.
Did you collect evidence?
Yes, I did.
Did that evidence include things such as shell casings?
Yes, they did.
Now, do you document precisely where different shell casings are found?
Yes, I do.
Your Honor, may I approach witness?
You may.
Detective, I'm showing you it's previously marked as states Y for identification, a composite of 3 photos. Can you please review these photos?
Yes.
Detective, are those true and accurate representations of photographs that you took back in February of 2018 at Marjory Stoneman Douglas on the second floor?
Yes, they are.
Your Honor, at this time, the state would request to move in what's been previously marked as states Y for identification, composite of 3 photos in a states 20.
Any objection?
No objection, Your Honor.
Without objection, states Y for identification will now be in evidence. That is states Exhibit 25, a composite exhibit of 3 photos.
Your Honor, the TVs can be on for all of that.
The TVs can be on for all of
For all of this witness.
Understood.
Detective, I'm showing you what's the first picture in state, what's now in evidence, the state's composite 25. Zoom in here. Can you see, that's the clearest, I may have to show you in person. Can you see what classroom that is?
Yes, it's classroom 1231.
Okay, now looking back at states 24, 1231, is that on the north or south side of the building?
That's going to be on the north side.
Okay. Now showing you the second photo of states 25 composite. Did you take that picture?
Yes, I did.
And what is that a picture of?
Those are suspected projectile, either penetration or strike sites of the far window of classroom 1231.
What do you mean by penetration versus strike sites?
Well, when a projectile, if it makes any entry through any intermediate object that it goes through, it becomes a penetration site. If it just strikes the area without any kind of penetration, it's just, I document it as a strike site.
Okay, now looking at just for instance, the mark in the middle. Your Honor, can we do the annotator?
I'm
Is
gonna
it not?
try.
Okay. No,
State, I'm
okay.
doing the same thing.
I'll just do it the way
we've
Mr.
done
Klinger
before,
did.
but, yeah.
This, you see this one right here?
Yes.
And just for the record, it's in the middle of the photograph. What would that be considered?
That would be considered, as my report, strike site.
Okay, and that is because?
It didn't appear to make any entry through the window.
Okay, now looking at this one here.
That would be considered a penetration site.
And is that because of that little, like, hole, if you will, in the middle?
Yes,
That-
and it appeared to make some kind of entry through that area.
Now, based upon the shell casings that we're going to get into in a minute, does it appear as if the entire projectile made its way outside the window, or is it just a fragment of it?
It all depends. I couldn't tell you if it's the whole projectile, but a piece of that projectile made it through.
Okay, and this is facing northbound, so
Yes,
towards
it is.
the parking lot.
Yes.
I can't turn up the cord anymore. If you like, I can turn myself down even more.
Is that just a?
I'm at 35% now. I'll turn it down to
Yes, that's what we would
25%.
consider like a.
This is as good as I
overall
can
or
get on
intermediate
court audio.
photo Of the same projectile penetration or suspected strike site.
Okay.
I'm sorry the court audio is so low. I can't turn it up anymore. It's already at
Eubank,
did I pause it? No? Okay, hold on.
Detective, I'm now showing you what's been previously marked as State's Z for identification, a composite of 7 photographs. Can you please review these?
Yes.
I already have the audio boosted 600%. It's up all the way. I can't do anything more on the court audio. I'm sorry.
Detective, or did you take these photographs?
Yes, I did.
Are these a true and accurate representation of the south side of the building 12 that you took in February of 2018 at Marjory Stoneman Douglas?
Yes, they are.
Your Honor, at this time, the state requests to move in what's already been previously marked as our
It is really, really soft. I'm sorry. Closed captions are on. Closed captions are on. So if they're not being displayed, there's nothing I can do there either.
without objection, states Z for identification. will
Yeah,
now be in
closed
evidence.
captions are there.
That is State's Exhibit 26, a composite exhibit of 7 photos.
Move it up to the top so you can see it better. No, neither state nor defense has brought up the statute with respect to caregiver net yet. No,
State's 26.
not that I heard.
Do you recall taking this photograph?
Yes, I do.
Okay. And what room is this?
This is classroom 1234.
And is this on the south side of the 1200 building?
Yes, it is.
Thank you, Thomas, for the gift memberships.
Now, in the photograph.
Thank you to the 400 of you who are currently here. Please remember to hit like, and for those of you who have Twitter, retweet the pinned comment. I'd
Those
appreciate it.
are two cartridge casings that were just right outside the door.
Are cartridge casings, are those part of a bullet?
Yes, they are.
Which part of the bullet is a cartridge casing?
Just it's the casing that holds in any kind of projectile or any other propellant inside the shell casing.
Now, looking at the second photograph, was this photograph taken inside of room 1234?
Yes, it was.
Okay. And the mark right there, once again, I'll have to use my finger. Do you see that mark right there?
Yes, I do.
And what is that consistent with?
That's consistent with another suspected penetration site, which on this point, it's on the far blind of the classroom.
Okay. Now, looking at this over here on the left side of the picture, what is that consistent with?
That's another familiar projectile penetration site.
Now, looking at the third picture in States 26. What is this, like, sticker there? What is that purpose of that?
Those are.
I wish I could
usually
do
they're
more for you
measuring
guys, I really
adhesive
do.
measuring scales. Every time we're documenting.
If I streamed this in
any
OBS, I
part
might
of
be
the
able to do
scene
more with
that
like
has to do
compression or
with
something.
either,
But that leads to its own
It could be
problems.
suspected penetration sites, it could be simple, just evidence items. We put those on the picture just to help better grasp and view the either the size or the definition of the area that we're taking a picture of.
And if I'm not mistaken, it says 1234K. What is the K an indicator?
Yeah, so on this particular room, we had so many either penetration sites or strike sites that I start lettering them either from A, B, C, all the way up. And this particular case, as you guys can see, it's already at the K at this particular time.
Now, zooming in at K. I know it's hard to see on this. Let me see. Where is the strike site or penetration in this particular photo?
In this particular photo, it's just about the adhesive scale, and it's just right through the screened in area of the window.
So now, do you see any, or do you recall seeing any damage to the actual window pane consistent with this?
Not in this area, no.
Okay.
Yeah.
this photograph was taken because of their tear, so to speak, in the screen.
Yes.
Now looking at the fifth picture, focusing in on over here. See how close we can get. Do you recall taking this photograph as well?
Yes.
Okay. Now, based upon what you see there, and I guess it's 1, 2, 3, 4G, is that consistent with a strike or with a penetration?
That's with a strike.
Looking at the next photo, which is a close-up of what we just looked at, how can you tell it's a strike as opposed to a penetration?
That made the, I think you guys see it's 1224G. It made a penetration to the screened-in area, but with the window, I did not see any penetration to that window.
And just for clarification purposes, silly question, but there's a screen before the actual glass pane in these windows.
Yes, that means the particular projectile or fragment, which it made contact with an intermediate target, which was the screen, and then eventually hit the window.
So it hit the screen and then hit the window.
Yes.
Now this is just a zoomed out picture of the exact same thing. Now, do you recall how many shell casings you recovered from the second floor?
I believe it's a total of 6.
Your Honor, may I approach the witness?
You may.
Detective, I am now showing you what's already been previously marked for identification as 2A or AA, state's identification. Take a look at this. Do you recognize this?
Yes.
What is it?
These are the shell casings that I documented, photographed, and collected on that particular day.
Are these shell casings in the same or substantially the same condition as when you recovered them from
Yes,
the
they are.
second floor? Your Honor, at this time, the state would request to move in states 2A or AA.
I really appreciate the 400 of you who are here.
Any objection?
If you could retweet
Without
this,
objection, states
every one
2A
of you who
for
retweets
identification
really,
found
really
in
helps.
evidence that is States Exhibit 27.
There's currently 12 of you who have retweeted this. If we could get that number up to 25, that'd be really helpful.
Your Honor, may I publish?
So if some of you could go over to Twitter and please retweet the pinned comment, I'd really appreciate it. Thank you. It does make a huge difference in helping to grow the channel.
Again, ladies and gentlemen, if you want to take a quick moment and then pass it to your neighbor, and once it goes all the way around, the attorney will collect it again. I'll remind you, this item, as well as all the exhibits and evidence, will be back with you when you are deliberating the case. So this won't be the only chance.
That is not the link to
material.
retweet. The link to
Everything
retweet
that's
is in the
evidence
pinned
and so will
comment.
be back
Kit
with
Kat.
you in the jury room when you are deliberating the case.
Now 16 of you have hit the retweet button. Thank you so much for helping. Kit Kat, it's in the pinned comment. The pinned comment is correct. Please retweet the pinned comment. You can click on it, and it will get you to the window, and all you have to do is hit the retweet button. It'll take you 2 clicks.
Where precisely, we can go
Maybe
just
3
over
if you have to
one
hit OK after
by
that.
one. Where did you find these shell casings? For reference purposes, states 24 is in front of you on the screen.
In each box, you'll see I marked the room number that they were located just outside of, and also the caliber or head stamp information of the round.
Okay, so let's start with the first one, the top one there. Where did you find that shell casing?
And here it says 1231 FC1, which is fire casing 1, and which states is outside of room 1231.
Okay. So in the hallway?
Yes.
Okay. Looking at the second one, the second casing.
This one is 1231 FC2, fire casing 2, and it's right here. It says I collected it soft wall just outside room 1231.
What do you mean by soft wall?
It's just right. It's not right next to 1231 classroom. It's just a little bit. It's just a little bit away from it.
So like on the wall?
Yes.
As opposed to near the door?
Yes.
Okay. This was found in the hallway as well?
Yes.
Okay. What about the third one?
The third one.
Now we have 24 of you retweeting. Thank you very, very much for all of you hit that retweet.
FC1,
Really does
fire
help.
casing
Thank you.
1, and this one was 12, just outside room 1232 on the hallway.
In the hallway?
Yes.
Okay. So 1232?
Yes.
Okay. Are those consistent with the shot strikes that you saw on the window panes heading towards the north side of the building?
Yes.
Okay. Looking at the fourth one.
This is, it has 1234, which is classroom 1234 is fire casing 1, and it's, I marked on here the floor just outside of classroom 1234.
Okay. Was that in the hallway?
It was right next, almost next to the door of 1234.
Okay. What, was it in the classroom or in the hallway?
No, it was in the hallway, it wasn't in the classroom.
Okay. How about the fifth one?
This is fire casing 2, again, classroom 1234, and on the floor just outside classroom.
Okay. So in the hallway?
Yes.
Okay. What about the sixth one?
The sixth one, fire casing 3.
Thank you, Jessica.
As it states here, classroom
Adjust
1234, and it's collected on floor near door of classroom. This one was a little bit more kind of in the threshold of the classroom, like near the door.
Near where the door
It's
frame
when the
would
door
be.
opens, right on the threshold.
Understood. Were any shell casings found either inside the classrooms of 1231 or at 1234?
No, this was the closest one, it was within the threshold.
Okay. And of those 6 shell casings consistent with how many shots being fired on the second floor?
Yes, as far as casings wise we found, yes,
You found 6?
6.
All in the hallway?
Is that,
All in the hallway?
yes.
Okay. Well, going back to states 26. Looking at this photograph here. How does this photograph, or what you see there, differ from what you saw on the north side of the building in terms of the shot strike or the shot that penetrated?
Well, this one in particular, it's, you could obviously, you can see that it was more of a strike mark, not a penetration. It did, if you'll see the red, on this, window plane, you'll see different areas that pieces of projectile probably penetrated the screen, but this one in particular is penetrated the screen, but just struck the window with no penetration.
So it didn't go outside the window, it stayed inside?
No.
Whereas in states 25, looking at this one here, with that little hole in the middle, something went outside.
Yes, it appears so.
Now to room 1234,
Thank you for the 26 retweets.
showing what's written defense ID F. Do you recognize this? Can you take a look at it?
Yes.
Okay, do you see approximately, or not approximately, do you see building 12?
It's right over here.
Your Honor, may I ask the witness to?
Sure.
North, south, east, west. Looking at room 1234, so the one that you're looking at on the screen. Is that south or north?
This is building 12, so this will be south and this will be north.
Okay, so this one, 1234 though, is that heading, that's heading south?
That's will be this way.
Okay. And based upon the photographic evidence that you took from room 1234, no
Let me log into my
projectiles came
alt here.
outside of that?
As far as the pictures that I've taken and documented, no.
Anything else during your investigation when you were on the second floor show that any projectiles went out any of the windows facing south?
As far as I documented, no.
All right, because of you guys reaching my goal, I'm going to gift you 5 memberships under my alt account of Blackleaf. So I'm gifting it back to you because you were helpful to me in helping to reach
Okay,
my goal. Thank you.
cross-examination, go ahead.
We have no questions.
State, is the witness excused?
He is.
Sir, you may step down. Thank you very much. While he's doing that, State, you may call your next witness.
The state calls Detective Danny Polo.
Hi, everyone. I really appreciate you being here with Uncivil Law. Yay! Thank you for retweeting. That means I don't have to breathe acid on you.
And sir, once you're seated, if I get you to scoot that chair all the way up as far as it will go through. Can you please state your full name and spell your full name?
Danny Polo, last name's P-O-L-O.
D-A-N-N-Y?
D-A-N-N-Y.
All right, State, give me 1 second. Okay. State, just for future reference, do you see the annotator on your screen now?
Yes, Judge, I do.
Okay, very good.
If we reach 1,000 simultaneous watchers one of these days
Understood. Thank
while
you
we're
very much.
streaming,
Okay,
I'm going to
State, you
gift
may
100
file-
gift
go ahead.
memberships.
Good afternoon. Before we get
So I'll
started,
give you a little
can you
teaser.
explain to the members of the jury why it is that you're wearing a face covering?
Yeah, I apologize for that. I wear a mask because I work in undercover capacity, and there's been threats made against my life, so I'm on the TV right now. Don't want people to know what I look like.
Speak up, please.
Sorry.
I need you to speak up.
I said, I work in undercover capacity, and threats have been made against my life, so since I'm on TV right now, I'm trying not to show my face to everyone.
And so you're wearing the mask just because of your line of work, it's important to keep your identity concealed?
Yes.
Is that correct? Okay. Thank you. Detective, would you please introduce yourself to the jury? Tell them where you work, what unit you're currently assigned to.
I currently work for the Broward County Sheriff's Office in the Money Laundering Task Force. Prior to that, I was in the Gang Investigations Unit, and prior to that, I was in the Organized Crime Unit.
How long have you been a detective for?
Since 2017, 6-7 years.
And explain to the jury how BSO is kind of structured. Are you assigned to a specific district? How does that work?
The steak turned out
Yeah,
pretty
so
good.
most deputies are assigned to districts. So Deerfield Beach, Pompano, West Park, Dania. I believe we have 15 districts. The courthouse is one of them. And there's also county-wide specialized units. So like the Money Laundering Task Force is a county-wide unit. We handle everything in the county, not just specific districts.
So as part of your assignment to the Money Laundering Task Force, you're currently assigned to the entire county?
Currently, yes.
Okay. I'd like to turn your attention to February of 2018. What was your assignment at that time?
I was with the Deerfield Beach Crime Suppression Team. So I worked in the city of Deerfield Beach. I was assigned to the city of Deerfield Beach, and I worked in their crime suppression team.
What is a crime suppression team?
Primarily handle any crimes that the city might be having issues with. So burglaries, if there's burglaries in a specific part of the city, we would handle that. Robberies, if there's a robbery issue going on in a certain part of the city, we would handle that. Narcotics enforcement, firearms, violent crimes, anything that the city might need. We're kind of just supposed to handle anything they request. So it changes from day to day.
And that's a role as a detective?
Yes.
Okay. So specifically, February 14th, describe for the members of the jury what you were doing that day.
If I remember correctly, we had just finished an operation. I don't recall exactly what we were doing, but I remember we had just got back to the police station. I'd taken off all my gear, my vest and all that, and we were just cleaning up. Then we got a call that there was a shooting at Marjory, Stoneman, Douglas.
When you got the call, what did you do in response? And I'm sorry, what city? You said you were in Deerfield?
City of Deerfield Beach.
Okay, and so what did you do in response to getting the call?
We all quickly left the office. I jumped in my partner's car for that day. I had just gotten a new vest, so I went to my car and grabbed my rifle plates out of it, which are plates that you would put inside a vest, or steel plates, and it's to stop rifle rounds. I grabbed those out of my car because they weren't inside my new vest yet, and I took them inside my partner's car so I can put them in the vest on our way there.
And did the rifle plates fit?
No, unfortunately they didn't. They weren't.
Describe for the members of the jury, so a regular vest that's worn under a law enforcement uniform, what's the proper term for it, that type of vest?
Soft armor?
The soft armor vest. Will a soft armor vest stop a rifle round?
No.
So if you're wearing a soft armor vest, what protection does that offer you if you're going up against a rifle?
None. It might slow the round down a little bit, but it really won't stop anything. It'll go right through.
So not much different than not having a vest at all?
It's basically the same thing.
And so that day, you did not have the plates that would protect you from a rifle, and you were instead wearing a soft armor vest?
Yeah, I was wearing a soft armor, like it's called a plate carrier. It's to hold rifle plates. It has soft armor in it, but the plates didn't fit, so I wasn't able to put the plates inside.
And did that deter you from driving to the scene of where the shooting was happening?
No.
Describe for the members of the jury the type of firearm you had.
I had my H&K 9mm handgun.
A regular pistol?
Yes.
Did the fact that you didn't have a rifle deter you from driving to this shooting?
No.
Explain for the jury what's going on in your head when you get a call that there's a shooting happening at a school and you realize that you're driving directly to it.
So initially, I mean, we get a lot of shooting calls when you respond, or you work for a crime suppression team, or you're out on the road working road patrol. You get shooting calls all the time, and usually it's, I would say most of the time they're not real shootings. You know, it's firework or it's just, you never figure out what it is. So we were responding like we would to any other call, any other shooting call, at, you know, lights and sirens going pretty fast. And then we heard over the radio that someone announced that there was a victim with gunshot wounds. That's when we knew it was going to be a real one, and not like every other shooting call that we get where you respond and it's nothing happened.
I'm gonna ask you to move closer to the microphone. So
Yeah.
Here.
Okay, yeah, I'm
All right.
gonna ask you to speak very close to the
Sure.
microphone. As you were driving there, is there anything that you need to do in order to prepare yourself for an active shooter situation?
Yeah, we weren't, like I said, we were responding like we would to any other call, but once we got confirmation that we had victims and it was 100% a real shooting, you have to put yourself in a different headspace. You have to prepare for it mentally. And I remember looking at my partner, and once we heard that there was victims, just kind of looked at each other like, all right, this is it, this is real, we got to do this. And I remember fist bumping him and just kind of psyching ourselves up, getting ready for what we might have to run into.
And when you say fist bumping, is this a jovial situation? What do you mean by psyching yourself up?
You're possibly going to get shot. So it's not a situation any of us want to be in, going up against a guy with a rifle, getting shot at, even with a handgun. Like, no one wants to walk into a shooting. It's the unknown.
Why do you do it?
It's what we're paid to do.
As you are pulling up to the school, where do you arrive on the campus?
Initially, someone told us to respond to the south, I believe it was to the football field. And we responded to the football field. When we got there, we noticed that there was nothing to do at the football field, so we moved towards the gate so that we can proceed to enter the school.
Do you recall hearing "stay 500 feet back" as you're on your way to the school?
Yes,
And what did you do with that instruction?
we disregarded it.
And why did you have to disregard that instruction?
It didn't make sense. It wasn't a smart command. You know, during an active shooter, you're not supposed to stage outside of it. You're supposed to go inside.
At the time, did you know that Scot Peterson was the person that said that over the radio?
No, I didn't know who was making commands over the radio.
In order for you to properly respond to this active shooter situation, did you need to disregard what you later learned to be Scot Peterson's command?
Yes,
When you arrive to the campus and do you eventually work your way towards the 1200 building?
yeah, we stopped at the football field for, I want to say maybe 30 seconds to a minute. These are approximations. A parent approached me. They were trying to get inside the school because their kid was in there. I reassured them that we had it, that we were going to take care of everything. And
I feel reassured.
stopped him from going inside the school because that would have created concerns and issues for law enforcement on scene. When I realized, after speaking with him, I realized we need to keep moving, so we got back into the car, moved to the gate where the entrance was, and at that point, we made contact with a couple other officers, and we proceeded to run inside.
Now, I want to be clear about the timing. Approximately what time did you arrive on campus?
It was about 2:35, 2:36 p.m.
And how many minutes after the first shots did you arrive on scene?
First shots were about 2:21 p.m., so it was 15 minutes.
And about how many minutes after it was announced, shots fired, did you arrive on scene?
After the first shots were fired?
After it was announced by Scot Peterson, shots fired at approximately
12 minutes.
2:23.
Yeah, about 12 minutes.
So 12 minutes after Scot Peterson announces shots fired, you arrive on scene.
Yes.
Okay, so describe what happens once you make your way to the 1200 building.
We ran inside. It was a team of 4 of us. No specific reason why we had 4 of us. It was me and my partner, and then we ran into one of our SWAT operators, and he looked around, saw another SWAT guy coming up, so we flagged him over. We got together. We ran towards the building. There's 2 deputies that were behind a vehicle. We made contact with them, asked them what was going on, and they gave us instruction on what they knew at the time, which was they pointed at the building where the suspect was last seen, or Nick Cruz was last seen, and they said that's where the last shots were fired, and they informed us that the other buildings had not been cleared, so we didn't know where or if he was in any other buildings.
I'm gonna ask you to move closer to the microphone. Did you hear any gunshots while you were on scene?
No, we arrived on scene. There was no more gunshots.
To the best of your knowledge, were any BSO deputies other than Scot Peterson on scene while there were gunshots going on?
No, there was no other BSO deputy there. I don't believe there's any other police officer there.
The only police officer on scene while gunshots were going off was Scot Peterson.
Yes.
Now, when is there, first, I want you to explain, you hear no gunshots, so explain to the members of the jury how the gunshots or stimulus would have impacted the way that you moved through that campus.
The way we're trained by the sheriff's office is when responding to a shooting, or to an active shooter specifically, if you arrive and you're hearing gunshots, they call that a stimulus, and you're supposed to respond by moving towards the sound of the stimulus. So if you hear gunshots coming from a specific area, you're supposed to move directly to that area and keep following that sound, because every time you hear a gunshot, it's a possible victim, someone who's just getting shot at.
Now, what if you don't know precisely where a gunshot is coming from? What does common sense dictate?
Just move towards the sound of that gunshot. You can hear the specific direction where something's coming from, so you just move towards it and then follow that sound. If there's multiple gunshots, then you would keep moving towards that sound.
And if you're standing somewhere where there's an echo, does it make sense to remove yourself from that hallway so that you can better hear?
No.
What would you do to hear?
Just get closer to it.
I know it sounds silly, but what would you do to be able to hear the sounds?
Just keep moving towards it. When we do training, they do, fake, or not fake, but they use, blank shells, and they replicate gunshot sounds. And I know that we can follow that gunshot. Yeah, there's an echo, but if it's coming from upstairs or it's coming from the same floor, you can hear it. And you can effectively move in the direction of a sound.
Is responding to the sound of gunfire something you train for?
Yes.
And you work for the Broward Sheriff's Office, the same police department as Scot Peterson, correct?
Correct.
Okay. So explain what happens next once you are inside or at the doors of the 1200 building.
When we arrived at the building, we entered the first floor, and we saw that, I believe it was Coral Springs Police Department officers had already entered the first floor, and they were clearing forward on the first floor. So at that point, it didn't appear that they needed any more bodies on the first floor, so we moved on to the second floor and began to move in that direction. We didn't have any gunshots that we were hearing. All we could, I smelled the odor of the gunfire. You could still smell the gunfire when we walked in, so in our minds it's still fresh, and it must have just recently happened, which it did, but we weren't there fast enough.
Up until this point,
When seconds
you
count,
were
baby,
realizing
right?
The first floor is taken care of and you have to move up. Have there been any dispatch or radio issues?
No, I didn't have any dispatch issues till later on, after arriving, so 30 minutes later.
So as you're on your way to the scene, are you able to hear things that are coming over the air?
Yes.
And so much so that you heard the state 500 feet back?
Yeah, stay
you're
500
able-
feet back, respond to the football field. Then a lieutenant took over the radio and started giving commands to respond directly to the school. Yeah, we heard all that.
At some point, do you start to have radio issues?
Yeah, there was a point where we realized that there was radio issues, but it's not something that we realized right away, because we're inside the school, so there's really no reason to be getting on the radio, because you're with everyone that's helping you clear the school, so you would just be speaking to them directly, not getting on the radio and telling them what you're gonna be doing. You're just gonna communicate with the officers that are with you.
To the best of your memory, approximately how long after the shooter had left the building entirely did you start to notice radio problems?
Say maybe 20 minutes.
Describe, like you just explained, how you speak to each other in person. Describe how the radio factors in while you're trying to work your way through the building.
Well, while we're working through the building, you're not getting on the radio. You're with everyone that's gonna be clearing the building with you. There was, at that time, like over 20 officers in there, and everyone's with us, so you don't need to get on the radio to tell the guy behind you what you're gonna do. You just tell the guy behind you, I'm gonna clear this room, I'm gonna go this way, I'm gonna take this hallway, and you give directions to people. While we were in there, we were with a couple SWAT operators, and when you have SWAT guys with you, they like to take command of these scenes, because this is what they specifically train for. Is it's more tactical for them, so it makes more sense for them to direct you at that point. But anyone can decide to do anything as long as you're communicating with everyone that's with you, with your team.
What floor do you go to the second floor?
We initially went to the second floor.
And what happens?
We started getting communications from someone watching the video, doing the video playback, and they were giving us the positions of where Nicholas Cruz was. Unfortunately, it was delayed. We weren't getting, it wasn't a live update, it was a delayed update where the video was, they were watching it from several minutes back. So we think we're inside the building with him, but he was already gone.
So in that moment, you thought that you were in the building with the shooter?
Yes.
How did you get the information that there was, I know it was wrong information, but how did you get this information that that the shooter was still in the building?
Over the radio.
And what do you do in response? Where does everybody go?
We were on the second floor, and someone keyed up over the radio, someone that was watching the video, and they told us that Nicholas Cruz was on the third floor. So now we're all obviously looking up the stairwell towards the third floor, because the person that's doing these shootings is on the third floor. So we have to keep an eye upstairs now. So I remember everyone kind of just turning up and looking up at the same time when they told us that he was on the third floor. Then we were told that Nicholas Cruz was going to be coming down the third floor, down the stairs on the third floor. At that point, everyone turned and pointed their guns in that direction, because if he came down, it was with a rifle, it was probably going to be a gunfight, and everyone was going to respond.
And in that moment, you still only had your pistol, correct?
Right.
What happens next?
Several people began to clear the second floor, looking for, victims, people that are injured. And I remember a couple officers were sent to the third floor to start clearing that, to get us into the third floor. And then I was called for. They said they needed more people upstairs, because there was several people injured that needed medical attention.
In that moment, did that communication indicate to you that manpower would be important?
Yes.
And that it was needed, additional bodies were needed on the third floor?
Yes.
In response to that, did you assist and go up to the third floor?
Yes, I ran up to the third floor, and at that point, one of the other officers was dragging one of the students, Anthony Borges, through the stairwell door, and they placed him on the 3rd floor landing before you go down to the 2nd floor.
Describe Anthony Borges' condition.
He was bleeding heavily. He had been bleeding for a while, and his clothes were covered in blood. And he was visibly in pain. He was just groaning, and I went down to the floor. I didn't have gloves, or I don't remember if I had gloves, but I didn't put them on at that point. And I noticed one of his legs was thoroughly soaked in blood. I took a tourniquet that I carried on my vest right here, took it off, and I began to apply the tourniquet to stop the bleeding. After I stopped the bleeding on that leg, some of the SWAT medics had just come upstairs, and we kept tending to all his injuries. He had bullet holes in his back, in his chest, his other leg, and started to cut off his clothing so we can assess all the injuries and make sure that we tended to all the wounds before we began to transport him.
By the time you applied a tourniquet to Anthony Borges, how long had he been laying there bleeding out, needing help?
Over 25 minutes, maybe longer.
Describe what else happened on the 3rd floor.
At that point, after we finished applying tourniquets to his legs, and the SWAT medics addressed the wounds on his back and his chest, we put him on it's like a black tarp, and we took him out downstairs, went all the way to the 1st floor, and then exited to the opposite entrance where we came in through. We placed Mr. Borges on a golf cart, and they took him to the nearest ambulance or fire truck.
What happens next?
Continued checking all the classrooms for additional victims, and began reassessing anyone that had injuries. There was a lot of injured people. There was a lot of dead kids that we couldn't tell if they were alive or dead. We had to go to every single student and assess whether they were alive or dead. And if they were alive, we had to address their injuries. I know there was a female on the 3rd floor that my partner thought we felt a pulse on, and we had to take her downstairs, but she had also passed. So it was just going from door to door, just making sure we took care of all the injured students.
Once the students that could be treated were treated, and it was determined who was deceased, what else did you do as far as the 1200 building, or did you move on and assist in other ways?
We stayed in the 1200 building for a while. We had to evacuate the entire school. By this point, we had learned that Nicholas Cruz was no longer in the building, and he was then shortly thereafter taken into custody. Once he was taken into custody, we began evacuating the school, and we just assisted all the students in leaving. Anyone with injuries were assisted out. I personally was on the 1st floor, just reassuring the kids and helping them get out. And obviously the kids are scared, and obviously the kids were scared, and they needed kind words to reaffirm and help them get through that moment.
Did you know Scot Peterson prior to this incident?
No.
I'm going to ask you to take a look over the defense table. Did you see the gentleman sitting at that table on the left inside the 1200 building on that day?
Not that I can recall.
Were you wearing a body camera?
I was.
And was it recording?
Yes.
Did you have a chance to ensure that the recording was properly uploaded and review it before
Yes.
Are we actually going to see some body cam footage? This might be helpful. We get to see some body cam footage, so we actually get to see something that's happening. That'd be nice.
Marked as States X. Did you have a chance to review the body worn camera?
Yes, I reviewed it.
Judge, at this time, the state moves into evidence what's been pre-marked as States X as States. Oh, I'm sorry, it's been pre-marked as. So it'll be pre-marked as 2B, and will be coming into evidence as 28.
Any objection?
No new objections other than my motion.
No additional objection?
Correct.
Okay, over the defense objection. States 2B for identification will now be in evidence. That is States Exhibit 28.
I'm not sure I 100% like the way the defense lawyer liked that. I would have said we renew our objection that we stated in our motion limine. Rather than no new objection, I would have made it clear we're renewing the objection, but. All right, are we going to get to see something? No, apparently not.
Northeast corner by the fire truck.
Oh, man. Oh. Fucking swastika on that.
That's the bad guy zero. Somebody needs to stay here with that. Let me back up. So.
Let's leave the light.
Hey, it's 10 minutes is done. Radio's messed up. Have them start coming in there.
Start moving up.
We got guys coming. We got guys coming. We need.
Where's he shot? Where's he hit? Leg? Fucking tourniquet. Flying a tourniquet.
I'll send them to the west side.
We gotta move him out of the stairway. Shot in the back too?
Yeah. This shooter? No. No, it's first. I'll check it. Hey, you know we got it?
Got shot in the back.
Tell you what, Christy, I am getting real tired of this. This isn't me yelling at you, by the way. I want to make this clear. This is me yelling at Discord. I am getting real tired of the Discord link not working all the time. I just want to work. I keep fixing it. I keep trying to reset it, and it keeps not working, and it keeps pissing me off.
It's gonna hurt. You're all right.
Uncivil law is grumpy.
Your Honor, I'm renewing my objection.
Yeah, over your objection, which is otherwise preserved. Go ahead, Steve.
Detective Polo, was that Anthony Borges that we saw in the video?
Yeah, that was Mr. Borges.
And how important would you say in that moment it was to get him to a doctor or a hospital, an emergency room?
It was extremely important. He had lost a lot of blood. He was very injured.
I noticed that you were applying the tourniquet and applying that kind of medical, is it called combat medical? What's the term for it?
Combat medicine, I think now they're calling it, I forgot what the sheriff's office is calling it, or not what the sheriff's office is calling it, technically the military calls it something else. It's a TCCC, it's tactical combat. It's basically just combat medicine, basically, which is applying medical intervention as quickly as possible on the field before you transport someone to the hospital. That way they don't keep losing blood, and you can address, critical injuries like a punctured lung, stuff like that, before you start transporting them. It's been shown to increase the rate of survival for injured people in the military. And the application of tourniquets and chest seals and packing wounds and stopping the bleeding is the most important thing.
And you're not on SWAT, are you?
No.
So you received the same training that is available to other BSO employees that aren't on SWAT?
Yeah, it's standard training that everyone in the sheriff's office receives.
I have nothing further.
Okay, cross-examination, go ahead.
Good afternoon, Detective Polo.
Afternoon, sir.
I just wanted to clarify one of the things that you said,
I bought a new fry pan on Amazon. I'll be here on Wednesday.
that when shots are being fired, was it your testimony that no other deputies were on scene to hear shots fired? Is that your testimony?
I believe that's what we learned after they did the investigation into the shooting.
Is that what you believe? That's what you're swearing to today?
Objection asked and answered.
Yeah, that's sustained.
Is that your firsthand knowledge based upon what you learned that day?
I believe that's what was learned during the Parkland Commission.
So it's your
I
testimony.
want
that
to
Sergeant
kill
Miller wasn't
things.
there to hear shots?
Sir, I don't know. That's what I believe. I don't recall anything else.
Is it your testimony that Deputy Kratz wasn't there to hear shots?
Objection, lack of personal knowledge.
Yeah, well, it's overruled, but sir, I don't want you to speculate or guess. If you have personal knowledge of some of these things, you can say what your answer is, and if you don't, you can say, I don't know. Go ahead, sir.
Yeah, I don't know, sir.
Do you know whether Deputy Perry was there to hear shots?
I don't know, sir.
Do you know whether Deputy Goolsby was there to hear shots?
I don't know.
Do you know whether Deputy Stumbaugh was there to hear shots?
I don't know.
And what about Deputy Seward? Do you know whether he was there to hear shots being fired?
No, sir. I don't know.
You did testify that you did hear Deputy Kratz announce
Hog
shots
hunting-
fired
hog
from the
hunting does sound
football
fun.
field, correct?
Objection, counsel testifying that's not what the record reflects.
No, that's overruled. You can answer that question, sir. Go ahead.
I don't recall who made those. I stated that I don't know who got on the radio and made any of these statements.
I'm sorry, I can't hear you.
I said I stated during my direct that I did not recall, because I wasn't sure who was getting on the radio, who was making these statements.
Okay, but you definitely heard the substance of someone announcing over the BSO radio, shots fired from the football field, correct?
No, sir. They said to stage by the football field.
Was what?
Stage by the football field.
Are you saying stage?
Stage, like, go to the football field. That's what we were told to respond to.
Okay,
Not because there were shots there.
okay. So you're hearing over BSO radio, someone referring to the football field, correct?
Yes, sir.
And you don't know who it is who's referring to the football field, correct?
No, sir.
You arrived long after shooting was over, at least 15 minutes after the first shots, correct?
Approximately, yes.
Never shot hogs
You and Ed,
before,
you
but
were
I'm
the
willing to
team
get
of
started.
at least 4, correct?
Let's shoot
Yes,
some
sir.
hogs.
Who told you?
Let's put them on a spit, roast them up good, make some
Where
barbecue.
the shooter or shooters were located? How did you learn that?
When we went inside the fence, we sprinted.
I'll open
to
up my own
a
barbecue
vehicle where
restaurant,
there was 2
uncivil
deputies
law.
standing behind,
Pork barbecue.
and one of the deputies.
Do some mustard style, and we'll
told
do
us
some vinegar
the
style.
information that the shooting, the last known location was the 1200 building.
Okay, so you spoke to someone who gave you that information, correct?
Yes, sir.
You don't know where he got that information from, correct?
No, sir.
So we're clear, it wasn't because you heard it over the BSO radio, correct?
I don't recall.
My volume is a bit hot. Still, I can't keep adjusting it. I'm not going to be.
The truth is, you've never had a training where the possible sounds could be coming from hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of yards in one direction, or hundreds and hundreds of yards in the other direction. Same thing forward, same thing back. They don't train for that, correct?
Hundreds, no, do they do that training? No, sir.
No, your training, they typically narrow it down to one area and you're supposed to go in, right?
Usually you're inside a large building.
Correct.
like a school.
Got it. So they don't have a scenario where you literally, like you're
You won't
hearing
eat
a
hogs?
siren and you're driving along in your car.
Sounds like a you
right?
problem
Have you
to
ever heard
me.
that
Mhm.
before?
Yes, sir.
And you literally do not have any idea where the sound's coming from? They don't train you with that kind of scenario, do they?
I don't understand the question, I'm sorry.
Police officers don't have any better ability to hear a loud noise and know precisely where that noise is coming from, correct?
No, but you would know the general area where it's coming from.
Oh, sure, correct.
Yeah.
Objection, Judge, there's no question pending, this is just counsel testifying.
Yeah, go ahead, sir, ask your next question.
But officers don't have any special training or abilities to hear something and know better than a non-officer.
Uncivil
precisely where
barbecue is
something's coming from. Isn't that correct?
Objection, ask.
good for the world today.
No, that's overruled, sir, you can answer the question.
We would, like anyone else that can hear, we would know which direction it's coming from.
You knew that there was people in the video room trying to look at surveillance to find out where the shooter or shooters were located in real time, correct? That was your testimony, correct?
Yes.
And did you also know that it was my client who was relaying that information to people on the scene?
Objection, counsel testifying.
No, that's overruled. Again, sir, I don't want you to guess, but if you have personal knowledge, you can answer the question. Go ahead, sir.
No, I previously stated, I have no idea who was giving the
Okay.
instructions or who was telling us what was going on from the video room.
On scene, there were issues with your BSO police radio, correct?
Yeah, after we arrived, after
Okay.
time had elapsed.
And the
We'll get ourselves a
experience is
big,
what we
we'll get
call
ourselves some
throttling,
land.
correct?
We'll get ourselves a big ass smoker.
Explain for the jurors what was
We'll
happening.
get
with the
one that
radio
has an
in terms of
internal,
throttling.
like,
What does that mean?
Just means
rotating
you can't
thing,
communicate,
so
you
it can
click
rotate the
radio
pigs.
And it'll make like a bonking
Get a
noise.
big one. It has like a
and
little Ferris
can't
wheel inside.
Tell
Put one
other
big slab
people
of
anything, it
one
just won't
big
come through.
pig on each
And you
one.
experienced
It
that when you
rotates
got onto
inside the
campus,
thing.
correct?
Experienced it after we had been on the second floor for several minutes.
And it's not an issue if you're with a team of people and you can communicate with them real close, correct?
Yeah, that's what I testified to.
But when you're waiting for dispatch to give you information and the radios are throttling, that's a problem, correct?
You're on scene at a shooting, so you wouldn't be waiting for dispatch to give you information. You'd be the one giving the information out to other people responding.
Use
That wouldn't
maple wood or
change the way
something,
I
maybe?
respond
Some
because
sort of
I'm
cherry or
there.
something.
So I wouldn't need to tell dispatch,
Keep the
I'm going to
flavor
the
in there
third
from the
floor. I
smoke.
didn't do that, as you saw from the
Nom
body
nom
cam.
nom.
I just went to the third floor.
My question was, if you're waiting for real-time intelligence from dispatch and you have a radio that's throttling, that could hinder your ability to hear that information, yes or no, sir?
It would hinder your ability to give dispatch the information. It wouldn't hinder your ability to
Applewood, yeah.
respond to the shooting if you're on scene. Because you're on scene, you are the real-time information. Dispatch is not on scene with the shooter. So they do not have real-time information. They have secondhand information from whoever is giving that to dispatch.
Additionally, when there's other officers on the scene trying to communicate with other BSO deputies who aren't.
Yeah, I
within a few
think
feet,
mesquite is not quite what we're
having
looking for.
radio
Applewood sounds better.
throttling, that could prevent people from being able to give real-time intelligence to other BSO deputies. Yes or no, sir?
Giving real-time information to other deputies responding is not your primary duty when responding to a shooting.
That wasn't my question, sir.
Would it hinder you from telling other people what's going on?
Yes, that was my question.
It would, but that's not what you would be doing anyways.
Okay, so the answer to my question was yes. If one officer wanted to convey to another officer real-time intelligence, having a radio that's throttling would interfere with their ability to effectively carry that out, yes or no, sir?
Yes, sir.
Nothing further.
Based on that, any redirect?
Can you explain the trainings at the school that you referenced?
Sometimes they were at schools, sometimes they were just like large malls, buildings that were either decommissioned and the owners would let us go train in them. They're just
We could also do a
kind
little
of
mix.
very
We
much
could do
like a
like
school,
Like a little
sometimes
Applewood, maybe like
multi-story,
with a small
long
mesquite
hallways, lots
undercut
of doors. They play loud noises of people screaming to kind of
or
simulate,
something.
havoc and chaos, and then they
Pecan,
simulate gunshots in
cherry,
different rooms. Either using
yeah,
speakers or they're
maybe
using
apple, cherry with a
handguns
pecan
with
undercut.
with dummy rounds in them.
Could be
rounds
good.
that aren't. There's no cartridge. There's no bullet. It's just the explosion sound from the bullet. So they would play that in different rooms, and your job is to move in the sound of the gunfire and find the shooter.
And those are to simulate active shooter situations,
Yes.
and nothing else.
Based on that, any recross?
No, Your Honor.
State, is the witness excused?
Yes, Judge.
All right, sir, you may step down. While
Thank
he's
you,
doing that, can a quick sidebar, please?
Yeah, 3-1 Applewood mesquite, maybe a little bit less than that for mesquite, but maybe like 4-1 or even more less, 9-1. I don't know. We'll have to play with the ratios.
Ladies and gentlemen, we're going to press pause on the state's presentation at this point. Same admonition as always, please don't discuss the facts of the case, the evidence, the witnesses, or the testimony amongst yourselves or anyone else till we reach the end of the case. If you will leave the notepads in your chair, they will be waiting for you when you go back home. I'm going to repeat my continued request. Please do not do any research on the case directly or indirectly from any source whatsoever. I'm going to ask you to please not watch the news, not read the newspaper, no research on social media, on the internet from any source whatsoever regarding the people, places involved in the case. I hope you all have a nice night. I'm going to ask you to be back tomorrow, which is Tuesday, June 13th at 9:15 at the jury room, 9:15 a.m. tomorrow morning, Tuesday. All right, have a good night. See you tomorrow morning.
All right. That'll conclude us for that tonight then. So, unfortunately, we weren't able to see the body cam footage, which was a little annoying in terms of trying to figure out what's going on. Not a lot going on in terms of understanding the defendants' inactions and stuff like that. So, I'm not super impressed by the state's case so far, to be sad. It's a lot more of the same for me. Okay, guys, it is 3:42. I have improv at 7. And I need to go to the gym because I only went twice last week and I'd like to, up my game a little bit. So I'd like to, actually go to the gym today. So I'm going to go right now and go to the gym so that I can get that done. Then I'm going to shower and go to improv class. And that'll be today. I will be back on tomorrow at 8:15, I suppose. What are they talking about? Okay. 8:15, I suppose. I'll be back on tomorrow. And we will continue with this coverage. And maybe if we're really lucky, the sound will be better. Who knows? I have been on Civil Law. I hope all's well. Cheers, my friends, and goodbye.